What act was this revelation to you that you should do more?
Well, I tell you what it was, mainly. It was because I think I've been dancing since I was 5, one way and another.
Yes. You? Yeah.
And I'm now 80, so 75 years I've been dancing. So I've always known, as have dance teachers all over the country, that dance is actually the best form of exercise you can possibly do, because it's not just good for your body, but it's also great for your mind, for your mental health, for your mind, for your happiness, for your outlook on life. And, of course, you have to use your brain to remember what you're doing, so it's great for all sorts of things. And so I've known that, and dance teachers have known that, but it's always been sort of under the radar when people have thought about, how do I get fit? They sort of think automatically about going to a gym or doing a park
on a treadmill,
doing all of that. So when I was doing Strictly, I got wonderful reaction from the public. I mean, I was just overwhelmed with a lot of people saying that I'd inspired them to think about dance. And I thought, how can I put these two things together then? And I was listening to Chris Whitty on radio, he's the Chief Medical Officer for England, saying that because the National Health Service is having such financial difficulties, it would help if we all took more responsibility for our own health by, he said, play football, go to a gym. Why not dance, he said, and I thought, that's what I can do. So, because I've been involved with dance for a long time, I got in touch with every one of the dance organisations in the country, the ones who look after ballroom dancing, Latin, ballet, street dance, everything, all of them, and all the ballet companies, all the dance companies, and said, if we can get a national day of dance to get that message across, get dance teachers to open their doors and say, come and see what dance can do for you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. on this wonderful afternoon, and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, after reforms, Rupert Lowe appeared to cast doubt over Nigel Farage's leadership. The Tories of today claiming that reform is act warfare due to egos and personal ambition. I'll be joined shortly by the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, who claims reform are not serious. And this afternoon, a group of 40 Labour rebel MPs who object to Rachel Reeves' inheritance tax grab are expected to be carpeted by party whips. On today's show, we'll speak to the leader of Labour's rural revolt. Plus, I'll be joined in the studio by the farmer who says this is the biggest breakthrough for farmers so far. And meanwhile, new judicial guidance urges judges to go soft on ethnic minorities and trans people has been slammed as discriminating against straight white people. On today's show, I'll be joined by a top barrister and a top copper and ask them, is this proof of yet more two-tiered justice? And lefties used to say, give peace a chance. But this week they booed Donald Trump's goal to end the Ukraine war, and they cheered on, pumping more troops and bombs into Ukraine. On today's show, I'll be joined by the formidable Peter Hitchens, who says now wars are left-wing and peace is way out on the right. And I'll ask him, are lefties the new warmongers? Welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. So, are reform on the rocks? Well, they are if you believe the Conservative Party. They are saying that there are proof of splits within the party. As an interview by Rupert Lowe with Andrew Pearce of GB News in today's Daily Mail, where Mr Lowe appears to cast doubt over Nigel Farage's leadership and even fancies himself potentially, with the bookies odds, he's a joint favourite with Angela Rayner to be the next Prime Minister. The second favourite, beg your pardon. Farage is still the favourite. Is reform on the rocks? The Conservatives certainly think so. They'll be attacking them today. That's the question. Do you think reform are in peril? Or, actually, is the most divided party the Conservatives and they're merely projecting onto the upstart Reform UK? That's today's topic. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But that's time for your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The UK government has signed a deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea, the Ministry of Defence has announced. That announcement from the Ministry of Defence comes as Sir Keir Starmer, speaking in the northwest of England, said it would be a, quote, big mistake to think that, quote, all we've got to do is wait for a deal now between Ukraine and Russia, adding that the United Kingdom will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels today to discuss Ukraine and the threat of Russia, with President Macron and President Zelensky meeting this morning. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, spoke to GB News' Catherine Forster a short time ago.
We've enjoyed 80 years of peace, and we've enjoyed 80 years of peace because we've had such a close relationship with the United States. We are closer than any other country to the United States when it comes to our defence, our security, our intelligence sharing, and we've worked with our European partners within NATO, which is the most important alliance the world has ever seen. And we've never made that choice between siding, as it were, with the US or with Europe. Historically, we've never done that. Churchill didn't do it, Attlee didn't do it, and it's certainly not the right thing to do now when things are extremely volatile.
Well, those updates come as President Trump's administration confirmed that they had suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine as France steps in to offer intelligence. The White House said yesterday that it is reconsidering its pause in funding for Ukraine, and talks between the United States and President Zelensky's country over a minerals deal are ongoing. Defence Secretary John Healey is meeting his counterpart Pete Hegseth today in Washington. That brief breaking update, as you've been hearing now, Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has urged the Sentencing Council to reconsider its new guidance for judges to take account of a criminal's ethnicity before deciding their punishment as soon as possible, adding that she will review its powers and change the law if necessary. That comes as Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch also said her party would back a change in the law to overrule the Sentencing Council. The changes due in April would place more emphasis on pre-sentence reports, particularly for offenders from ethnic or faith minorities, young adults, abuse survivors and pregnant women. The Sentencing Council says its reforms aim to ensure consistency and avoid bias in the justice system. Robert Jenrick told GB News earlier on that the government needs to intervene.
It's completely outrageous and ludicrous, and it needs to stop. And frankly, the Justice Secretary should have known about this before, if indeed she didn't. She has a personal representative on the very Sentencing Council that issued these guidance. I've read the minutes. There was no objection raised whatsoever. The government have got to intervene and stop this, because I don't want a two-tier justice system.
Elsewhere, Irish Taoiseach Michael Martin said his country will help Sir Keir Starmer do anything to reset the UK's relationship with the European Union. The Prime Minister has met with the Taoiseach as part of the first annual summit between the two nations, with Sir Keir Starmer saying the UK and Ireland are opening the next chapter in their relationship. The leaders were in the northwest with senior government members to discuss defence and the economy, with the Irish Premier adding a short while ago that the summit was very positive. And a GB News exclusive now, another 200 small boat migrants made it to the UK today, the 6th straight day of illegal crossings in a week. The latest arrivals take the total number of Channel migrants to reach UK waters since Saturday to 1,578. That now means 3,634 have reached the UK since the 1st of January. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Martin.
Thank you, Katie. Now, here's today's big question. Is Reform UK on the rocks? Well, that's what the Conservative Party are claiming today after Rupert Lowe, MP, MP Rupert Lowe has said that Nigel Farage acts like a messiah and needs to learn how to delegate. And he also said that if there are not changes, then he would not be by Farage's side at the next election. It's an astonishing interview in the Mail today with Andrew Pearce, who of course also works at GB News. And to discuss it, I'm joined in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. So, there's been talk about potential rifts within Reform. Rupert Lowe, of course, is incredibly popular with the electorate, very outspoken, very wealthy, so he can say whatever he wants, doesn't even draw his salary. In fact,
well,
he gives it away.
Though, really. A grown-up party wouldn't let him say these things.
So that's the first point. Let's talk about today's interview with Andrew Pearce.
That's right.
With Rupert Lowe and the schism that seems to have caused.
So the Daily Mail says, in an interview with Andrew Pearce, who works for GB News too, Rupert Lowe tells him it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. He can only deliver if he surrounds himself with the right people. He says we have to start behaving as if we are leading and not merely protesting. Nigel is a messianic figure who's at the core of everything that we do. I've got some other quotes here we can put on the screen for viewers and listeners. He says also, I'm barely 6 months into being an MP. I'm in the betting to be the next Prime Minister. And that's because Elon Musk backs him. And the quote's on the screen, as you see there. It's absolutely staggering, he says. I don't know where this has come from. He goes on, we have to start developing policy which is going to change the way we govern. I'm not going to be by Nigel's side at the next election unless we have a proper plan to change the way we govern from top to bottom. These are ultimatums in a party of just 5 MPs. And Rupert Lowe, to his credit, by the way, doesn't take any salary to be an MP. He's a self-made millionaire, we can call him that, I'm sure. He's someone who speaks from the lip. He is making a lot of the ground, the running ground, I think, in Parliament. This won't help Nigel Farage today.
He's also said, when he was specifically asked about the potential of a deal with the Conservatives, an electoral pact, which, of course, Nigel Farage has vehemently ruled out, Rupert Lowe said it's too early to say what will happen. You can't rule anything out. So another key policy split. And you're talking about another potential wobble earlier, and that is the Electoral Commission have got their funding figures out.
That's right. So there were 3 wobbles, I think, for Reform UK that we're reporting today. One about Rupert Lowe there, holding out a bit of flashing some ankle here towards the Tory party. Don't forget, both Kevin Baynor and Nigel Farage have said there can't be a merger, but below the line, we know Tory MPs talk about mergers. The first time we've heard the Reform MPs talk about it. That is fascinating. Will he try and do a deal behind the backs of Farage? We don't know. Some not great news on donations. Now, the Tory party raised £1.9 million in the past 3 months at the end of last year. Labour £1 million, Lib Dems 685,000. Reform at the bottom on 281,000 of those 4 parties. Put it differently, for every £1 raised by Reform, the Tory party raised £6. Now, I've got some quotes here from Reform UK. They say it's worth pointing out that they've gained over 70,000 members in the 4th quarter. So they are gaining members, but the money, the big money, is going to the Tory party when they're on the floor.
And when you consider that only a short while ago, $100 million from Elon Musk, that came and went pretty quickly.
Never confirmed by Reform, mooted in reports.
Nick Candy, of course, then hove interview, promising to raise money. And the situation is such today that the Conservatives have issued, we need to move on, the Conservatives have issued a press release. And to talk about that now, I'm joined by the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Chris, welcome to the show. So you're saying here that Reform seems to be at warfare. Tell us more.
It does. Well, good afternoon. Even though Reform only have 5 MPs, they seem to have descended into factional infighting already, with Rupert Lowe questioning Nigel Farage's leadership qualities, saying it's not clear whether or not he has what it takes. And Rupert Lowe described the Reform Party as a protest party with a Messianite leader. And I suppose that is what some people have been thinking quietly for a while now, that it is a protest party with a Messianite leader. Good slogans, I'll give them that, I'll say that much. They got good slogans, but have they got what it takes to develop a proper plan for government? And I don't think they do. It's clear, listening to debates in Parliament, that they don't. I mean, thinking, for example, about the border security bill that Labour introduced, or the border surrender bill, as it might better be known. I was there debating that bill, coming up with a critique of it, coming up with new ideas to clamp down on immigration, legal and illegal. And so were lots of Conservative MPs behind me, opposing this Labour government, coming up with concrete, tangible, detailed ideas. No Reform MP even attempted to make a speech in that debate. So when it comes to the serious work of opposing Labour and coming up with detailed, credible plans, they're just not there. And I think Rupert Lowe has now said out loud what it's been pretty obvious to everybody else.
Mr Philp, of course, Nigel Farage and indeed Rupert Lowe may counter this by saying it's a bit rich for the Conservatives to talk of divisions. You're two parties within one. That's why you were annihilated at the last election. There's half the party, according to Mr Farage, would be better off joining the Liberal Democrats. The wet Tories, as he called them, split on Brexit, split on net zero. Do you think you have your own divisions within your own party to worry about?
Well, look, there have been problems in the past, but those are behind us. The last election is behind us. We do, of course, have 20 times or 25 times more MPs than Reform do, but we are now united in a way that maybe wasn't the case in the past. If you think about it, since Kemi Badenoch became leader, in fact, since the general election, actually, we've been united. You haven't seen any of those splits that we had in the past because we're under new leadership. There's a new approach and we are a united party. And on issues like net zero, I think we're all clear on the Conservative side that we can't have a mad dash to wreck our economy by insisting on Ed Miliband's green madness that sees no more drilling in the North Sea. I mean, all of us agree, I think, that it's insane to end new exploration of oil and gas, particularly gas in the North Sea, and instead import it from other countries at vast expense. So we all agree that's a crazy idea. And people are paying the price of that in the form of higher bills and, businesses, particularly businesses that use a lot of energy, like, chemicals plants, cement manufacturing, steel.
Mr Philp, it would also be fair to point out that the Conservative Party had net zero targets in your election manifesto. It was the Tory party that introduced 85% taxes on British gas profits offshore. So you're also divided on that point. But look, I'm with our political editor, Chris Hope. He has a question for you.
OK. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for coming on Martin's show. A quick one. What do you think Nigel Farage should do about Rupert Lowe and his remarks about his leadership?
Well, I mean, we've seen leaders in the past, suspend people from the whip for saying that kind of thing. And we know, Nigel Farage, I imagine, will take a very dim view of it, won't he? Because this is open defiance of his leadership by Rupert Lowe there. So we'll see, won't we, what Nigel Farage is made of.
Well, there's a big challenge.
They're clearly riven by divisions, and Rupert Lowe has admitted that Reform is nothing more than a protest party that doesn't have the plans needed to fix our country's very, very serious problem, including on immigration.
To be fair to Rupert Lowe, he's not doing his thinking out loud here. He talks about the don't rule out a merger with the Tory party at the next election. Is that not the reality of what everyone is telling me behind the scenes? And would you say that now publicly? A Tory Reform UK merger is surely possible, at least, at the next election.
No, well, that's not our plan at all. And
not your plan, but it may happen.
It's not our intention. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it needs to happen either, because as obviously Rupert Lowe has come to this realisation that Reform is a protest party that doesn't have a plan. Rupert Lowe has come to that realisation pretty quickly because he's obviously inside it in Parliament every day. As the public think about it some more, they're going to reach the same conclusion that Richard Lowe has, that Reform is divided, doesn't have a plan, it's not just a protest party. And as the public realise that, I think the Conservatives will be able to demonstrate that we've learned from the mistakes we made in the past, and we did make mistakes in the past. Immigration was too high. That was wrong. It was a mistake. And we're now taking a different approach. So as we lay out detailed policies, and we've laid out a few already, like the hard cap on migration, I think the public will see we've got a plan that will fix these problems and kick out this terrible Labour government. And people will realise that we can't have a repeat of what happened last July, when voting Reform handed Labour a massive, massive majority, which Starmer is now using to give away the Chagos Islands, or in fact pay to give them away, hitting pensioners with winter fuel payments, hitting farmers, putting up tax on business, surrendering control of our borders. Unfortunately, by voting, a few people voting Reform last July, has put Starmer in power with a landslide. And I think people will realise we just cannot have that again. So we are fighting the next election to win it on our own.
Chris, does it have legs anymore to say a vote for reform is a vote for the Labour Party? People voted, a lot of them stayed at home because they saw year after year, election after election, the Conservatives didn't deliver what you promised on things like immigration. Over 1 million came in last year. This is way, way up. Small boat crossings, stop the boats was a 3-word phrase which never bore any fruit, apart from 2 voluntary people going to Rwanda. And so it's easy, is it not, in opposition to criticise what you should have done in power. And you can criticise Nigel Farage, but his popularity is far higher than Kemi Badenoch's at the moment. And a lot of people are saying, by the way, that Rupert Lowe is more Conservative than any of the Conservative MPs.
Well, you haven't met my colleagues or, heard what I think about immigration. Well, I'll start telling you now. So, look, we made mistakes. The Conservatives made mistakes on immigration. Those legal migration figures were far, far, far too high. That should never have been allowed to happen. It was a mistake and it was wrong.
But it did happen. It happened in every election since 2010.
Let me just finish the point. So late in the Conservatives' time in office, too late, admittedly, but late in the time in office, changes were made to increase all the salary thresholds and stop a lot of family members coming in. And the numbers are now declining quite significantly. The number of visas being issued are declining very substantially as those policies take effect. Now, that was too little, it was too late, but it was done, and it is now getting these numbers down. But we need to go further. And let me tell you 2 of the ways, as an example, we need to go further. One is we need to have a binding legal cap on migration set by Parliament. And when
David Cameron said that in 2010.
Well, so Cameron did it for non-EU citizens, and it worked for non-EU citizens. The cap was 20,000, and it actually worked. So we'd do the same thing, except for everybody, not just for non-EU, for everybody. You set a cap, and when the cap is reached, you just stop giving out any more visas.
So why didn't you do that in 14 years in power?
And so when Cameron did do it for
it's a great idea, but why didn't you do
it? Obviously, while we were in the European Union and during the transition period, we couldn't do it for Europeans because of the EU rules. There was a period of about 3 or 4 years at the end when it could have been done, but wasn't. And that was a mistake. That was a mistake. That was wrong. We got that wrong. And Kemi and I have said we will. In fact, we're going to put down an amendment to this border bill next week, which will set out the mechanism for having a vote in Parliament each year. Now, I've done the work to develop that amendment, and we're going to table it next week. Reform haven't done that. No one else. Nigel Farage hasn't done that. Rupert Lowe hasn't done that. I have. We're doing the work, and the cap can be set at a low level. That's one example. Another example is we've said we should stop giving visas and stop giving indefinite leave to remain. That's when people can stay permanently, as the name implies, to people that come here, saying they're going to work, who then don't work. If that happens, they should have the work visa taken away.
But that's another thing you had 14 years to do and didn't. This is down to trust and competence. You're clearly competent. Can people trust you? This sounds like things you should have done in 14 years in power. You never did. And then you got thumped at the last election. And you're now desperately trying to convince the electorate who went to reform because they didn't trust the Conservatives to go back. What's changed? Why should they trust you now?
Because as Shadow Home Secretary, I have said, honestly and openly, and Kemi Badenoch has said as leader, have honestly and openly said the last government made mistakes and got things wrong. And you've just pointed out quite fairly and quite rightly, you've pointed out what some of those things were. So how do we win back trust? Well, firstly, by just making the honest admission that I just have. Secondly, by developing detailed and credible and specific ideas to fix these issues. And I've just mentioned a couple of them, the binding visa cap, which I'm going to put down as an amendment to the bill next week and see if Labour vote for it. And I've mentioned the changes to indefinite leave to remain. They won't, probably no. We've got to beat them in an election before it'll happen. But let's put it to the vote in Parliament. And then I've mentioned, stopping people getting indefinite leave to remain, where they can stay here permanently if they come here saying they're going to work and then don't work, or even work at a low salary, right? We're putting forward those detailed ideas. I know it's going to be tough to win back trust, but by coming up with these specific, properly thought through, carefully thought through ideas, I believe we can win back trust. And that is the difference between us and Reform. They're not doing that work, as Rupert Lowe has admitted today. They are just a protest party with slogans. They're good slogans. I'll give them that. They're good slogans. But fixing our country's problems needs more than slogans.
OK, thank you very much for joining us on the show today as the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Thank you very much, Mr Philp. Well, Chopper, there we go. They're certainly on a front foot. Seems that everybody this week is having a pop at Reform UK. Now, Reform would say that's because they got them scared. It's because they've got them worried. But this feels like a joined-up attack. The Conservatives are at it, the Liberal Democrats are at it, the Labour Party are at it. Is this a mere wobble? Every party goes through a wobble.
Certainly, they are drawing fire, but the first attack from Lib Dems was about the patriotism or not of Nigel Farage. He would say it's patriotic. Others say you're friends with Donald Trump. He undermines Zelensky. Therefore, are you that patriotic? That's one attack on him. Today's attack is about organisation, the party. You heard Chris Philp saying that it's time to suspend the whip of Rupert Lowe.
But he would say that,
challenge. Well, what he's saying, a challenge to Nigel Farage. And also, I thought fascinating how the Tories next week will amend migrant and migration legislation to have an annual cap, an annual vote on what the cap should be. That's their party's policy.
But it won't make a blind bit of difference and get voted down by the Labour Party. As I said to Mr Philp, they can amend bills all they like in opposition. They had 14 years in power to actually do it.
They're more organised.
They didn't.
They're more organised than the Reform UK. The thing is, Reform UK is not organised. They've got 5 MPs. You can't have senior members saying this about the leader and have no consequences. That's what I think is a challenge here for Reform UK. Has the party grown up from being a protest party to a party that pretends to form the next government?
Well, it's all kicking off. Let us know out there what you think. Is Reform on a wobble, or is it just part and parcel, the cut and thrust of Westminster? Now, coming next, thank you very much, Chris. Excellent as ever. Now, our new sentencing guidelines, blatant bias against Christians and straight white men. More on that next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Our hope is that this will have impact to be able to drive connections for those who have been suffering from hearing loss and allow them to experience those special moments.
Okay, so how does the hearing aid feature actually work?
It's really simple, and that is what's so beautiful about the feature. We designed it so it could be used across all age groups, all tech savviness, if you will. You simply take a hearing test right on your iPhone using the AirPods Pro 2. It creates a personalized hearing profile, which then automatically pre-programs the AirPods Pro 2 to work as a hearing assistive device. And so just with the touch of a button, you'll now be able to augment the frequencies where you may need some assistance. And what's beautiful about the hearing test is it's a clinically validated audiogram. So we compared it to what is considered gold standard in the hearing world. And the hearing aid the hearing aid feature basically simply turns on and allows you to use it not just when you're talking with one another, like with another individual, but whether you're using it across phone calls, your media, your entertainment. So it's a really simple experience.
And have you noticed, because this has been rolled out around the world before it's come here to Britain, but have you seen a spike in people realising that they actually have hearing loss as a result of taking the test with this feature?
I can anecdotally share with you that even just in my circle and talking to people sometimes have picked up things that they didn't expect and noticed that they had some hearing issues. What's probably been so impactful is the letters we get from customers. One of the ones that we just got last week was a grandmother who was able to hear her soft-spoken grandchild for the first time by using this. And I think that is what's so special about it. We've already heard from customers around the world who have been able to use it over the past few months, how it's made an impact in their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Got some breaking news for you now, and it's this. Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him then murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. So just a quick update and repeat of that. Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him then murder her and her sister with a crossbow, and he then killed their mother with a butcher's knife. Breaking news there. We'll bring more on that as the story unfolds. Now, moving on, the Tories will attempt to overturn new two-tier justice rules for judges that give special treatment to criminals from ethnic minority, religious and gendered minority backgrounds. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has promised to write to the Council to recommend reversing the guidance. But for now, it's certainly got a lot of people raising their eyebrows. And one of them is joining me now in the studio. It's the former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Bleksley. Peter, I saw the story this morning. I immediately got hold of you because I knew this would raise your shekels. Tell us more.
Sitting on top of the Old Bailey, the most famous criminal court in the world, is a statue of Lady Justice. In one hand, she has a sword to represent the might of the criminal justice system. In the other hand, she has scales to represent balance. Most importantly, she is blindfolded.
Yes.
Because, of course, justice should be administered regardless of colour, creed, race, faith, any kind of matter like that. Sadly, and appallingly, the dangerously liberal Sentencing Council has trampled over centuries of judicial precedents by issuing these clearly prejudiced and unfair guidelines.
What they're basically saying is a pre-sentence report will be compiled pointing out any special circumstances, such as if they come from an ethnic minority background, or they've been oppressed because of their faith or their gender, or even if they're women and they're pregnant. This will then influence the sentencing, presumably to mitigate it, to either reduce the sentence or keep them to a suspended sentence altogether. Now, there's been a huge backlash, including, it must be said, from the Secretary of State for Justice, Shabana Mahmood, who said that this isn't on, it should be reversed, but she's in charge.
She has a representative that sits on this ridiculous body. And please, trust my sources, the Sentencing Council has a liberal groupthink where they seek to try and find an excuse for any person from any form of minority to not be sent to jail. And of course, their mask has slipped, and that has been clearly displayed by the issuing of these guidelines that were due to come into force next month.
And Peter Bleksley, if you're a defence counsel and your client's in court, you're going to be getting your violins out and looking for any old jackanory to mitigate the sentence against your clients. You're handing, ostensibly, a chance for lawyers to reduce sentences, specifically by playing the race card, the gender card, the religion card. You're handing two-tier justice out on a plate.
It's less of a chance, it's more of a charter. Anybody from any minority, no matter what that may be, there you go, you will receive lighter justice than if you and I were to go out, have a few pints and have a very disorderly punch-up in the car park.
Which nobody, of course, would advocate.
Correct.
Even if Nottingham Forest lost. On a serious point, serious point, this really does underline all those conversations we've been having since the Labour Party got into power. We saw it with the Southport riots, we saw it with pro-Palestine protests. Two-tier justice has been a phrase that won't go away. Peter Bleksley, this cannot help that.
It really won't. But can I mention another matter that Shabana Mahmood mentioned yesterday when she spoke to the media? And in my opinion, this has displayed quite clearly her inexperience and her unsuitability for the role as Justice Secretary. Yesterday, she said, in an effort to clear the Crown Court backlog of cases, which is huge, they are looking to find more cases that will become summary only, so they can only be heard in the magistrates' court. Let me point out, there was a crime and policing bill not so many years ago that ruled that shoplifting under 250 quid could not go to the Crown Court, and look where that's got us.
It exploded.
With a shoplifting epidemic, which is absolutely rampant, coupled with abuse and assaults on staff. If they find other offences that then will not be allowed to go to the Crown Court, I suspect we'll have another epidemic of whatever offence it is they foolishly choose to downgrade.
I think you're absolutely right, and it will lead, no doubt, to a criminal explosion amongst the very people they're pertaining to help, because they'll think, well, hang on a minute, I can get away with a bit more here. It's worth pointing out that the Secretary of State for Justice, Shabana Mahmood, did issue a statement saying, as someone who is from an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind. There will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. But there is.
We'll have to wait and see about that, won't we? Shabana Mahmood should have stepped up and sacked the Sentencing Council, excuse me, because they clearly showed they are not fit for purpose. They are trying to encourage bias, which is completely against all the fundamental principles of our criminal justice system, and they need to get some real people with proper life experience into those positions.
Peter Blakeslee, excellent as ever. Thank you very much for joining us today in the studio here on GB News in Westminster. Now, let's return now to that breaking news story, and that is of Kyle Clifford, who's been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner, Louise Hunt. And our national reporter, Charlie Peters, has the very latest. Charlie, an horrific case and fresh details emerging. Bring us up to speed.
Well, Martin, the jury went out to start their deliberations just over an hour ago and returned with that guilty verdict in just 50 minutes, responding, as they did, to a unanimous decision with evidence that really was insurmountable for Kyle Clifford's defence team. He's been found guilty of raping his ex-girlfriend, Louise Hunt, during the triple murder of Louise, her mother and her sister. That's Carol Hunt and her sister Hannah, aged 28, at the time of that murder in Bushey in Hertfordshire in July of last year. Those murders he had previously admitted but had denied this charge of rape. And at Cambridge Crown Court this week, there has been extremely difficult evidence to hear for the family. There was applause in the gallery, the public gallery of the courtroom when the verdict from the jury was handed down. We also had the attendance of John Hunt, the BBC racing commentator, who is the husband of Carol Hunt. He attended the trial this week, listening to extremely difficult evidence as it was read out to the jury that returned with that unanimous verdict in just 50 minutes. As John Hunt had to listen about details of a violent attack that ruined his family, that murdered those dearest to him. The prosecution involved described the meticulous planning behind that attack, how he had purchased a butcher's knife and a crossbow, details of which have now been released for the first time by the constabulary. We've also heard very recently from Lisa Kift, who is the senior Crown prosecutor for the CPS, saying that Kyle Clifford is a murderer and a rapist who carried out a savage act of violence against 3 women. Lisa Kiff said that his crimes are among the very worst I have encountered in my career, and he now rightly faces a life sentence behind bars. She said that on behalf of the Crown Prosecution Service, I want to express my heartfelt sympathies to the Hunt family. I have been personally touched by their strength, dignity and courage in the face of overwhelming trauma. We hope some solace can be found in today's verdict, and they feel justice has been secured for Carol, Hannah and Louise. Clifford was left paralysed from the waist down and now uses a wheelchair after a self-inflicted injury as he tried to flee from a manhunt in those 3 murders in Bushey last July. But Kyle Clifford, that face is on your screens, he is now a guilty murderer and rapist and now faces life behind bars.
Thank you, Charlie Peters, for bringing us up to speed on this quite terrific case. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now let's go straight to your latest news headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. Your top stories this hour. And the breaking news, as you've been hearing, triple killer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. The 26-year-old was found guilty by a jury at Cambridge Crown Court after around 45 minutes. He previously denied raping his ex-girlfriend Louise Hunt. Clifford had previously been found guilty of murdering Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt at their home in Bushey in July last year. We'll bring you more on that breaking news soon, but to recap, Kyle Clifford has been found guilty of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in that attack. The UK government has signed a deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea, the Ministry of Defence has announced. That announcement from the Ministry of Defence comes as Sir Keir Starmer, speaking in the northwest of England, said it would be a, quote, big mistake to think that, quote, all we've got to do is wait for a deal now between Ukraine and Russia, adding that the United Kingdom will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels today to discuss Ukraine and the threat of Russia, with President Macron and President Zelensky meeting this morning. An update from the White House a short time ago. They say there is no decision at this time on the legal status for Ukrainians in the US. That comes as President Trump's administration has confirmed that they have suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine as France steps in to offer intelligence. The White House said yesterday that it is reconsidering its pause in funding for Ukraine, and talks between the United States and President Zelensky's country over a minerals deal are ongoing. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2905 and €1.1902. The price of gold is £2,261.33 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,688 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Derbyshire, the M1 is closed northbound. That's for resurfacing work after a collision earlier. The M1 shut from junction 29 at Chesterfield along to 29A for Markham Vale. In West Yorkshire, the M62 eastbound is shut after a collision involving a lorry between junction 27 at Gildersham and 28 for Tingley. In South Yorkshire, the M1 northbound, there are two lanes shut there for emergency repairs between Meadowhall at junction 34 and Rotherham junction 35. And in Manchester, the M61 northbound is partly blocked for emergency repairs, and they're taking place at junction 1 for the M60 at the Swinton interchange.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
no,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 3:42 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, lefties used to say give peace a chance, but this week they booed Donald Trump's goal to end the Ukraine war, and they cheered at the prospect of pumping yet more troops and bombs into Ukraine. Well, we can now speak with a Daily Mail columnist, the formidable Peter Hitchens. Peter, you wrote an excellent column in today's edition, and you said something that really resonated with me. War used to be right-wing, peace used to be left-wing, but something changed. What's going on?
Well, exactly what is going on. I remember, don't ask me how I know this, but my late brother once spent quite a long time in the depths of a night in 1967 painting the slogan, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" on a hoarding in Broad Street in Oxford. And a few decades later, he was in the White House chumming up to George W. Bush and a great friend of Paul Wolfowitz, the warmonger supreme of Washington, cheering on the Iraq War. It's absolutely amazing transformation. And because my brother was rather more intelligent than most left-wingers, he spotted this perhaps earlier, but it's quite obvious now, and has been really since the 1990s, that the 1960s left are actually increasingly keen on war. What's fascinating is that although the wars they're keen on tend to be utopian, idealist wars, supposedly to bring democracy to the Middle East or feminism to Afghanistan or whatever it is, these wars are supported by right-wingers who, as far as I can see, since I am a right-winger, should be opposing them. And yet when I suggest that they're foolish, I'm shouted down and told I'm a traitor and a Kremlin apologist and all kinds of other rude things. And there's absolutely no consciousness of the really strange about turn that everyone's made. And until Donald Trump made his speech to Congress, in which he said that the prospect of peace between Russia and Ukraine was beautiful, and then went off into something which could easily have been sung by Bob Dylan in about 1965, it became plain. Here was the most, at least theoretically and by reputation, right-wing United States president since Ronald Reagan, and he was peacenik. And the people who were against him, the left-wing congressmen and women, they were all warmongers. The left are the warmongers, the right are the peaceniks. But only in the United States. In Britain, everybody's a warmonger except me. And I think it really is time that people on the British right started to wonder whether they're on the right side. Why is it that they're so keen on these wars? Can they explain it? What it is that they're up to? None of them, when confronted with the facts about any of these wars, knows anything about them at all. Most of the right-wing supporters of the Ukraine war, for instance, don't know where it is on a map, don't know how the war began, don't have any idea of the issues, and will deny until they're purple in the face that the Russians were provoked, though they absolutely obviously were, and even some of the toughest neoconservatives in Washington, D.C. will admit that they were. So here we are in a position where one lot has completely changed its mind, and the other lot, which ought to have changed its mind, won't do so. And I thought it was time to mention it.
Peter, you make another excellent point where the left seem to describe everybody they oppose as a fascist, and that justifies their rush to armaments because, of course, what can be more laudable, what can be more noble than fighting fascism? But do you think there's a possibility, Peter Hitchens, that Donald Trump, if he talks to the Taliban, something the left don't ever seem to want to do, if he ends that war in Gaza, if he ends the war in Ukraine, he could be faced with winning the Nobel Peace Prize? That would be the ultimate embarrassment for the political left, would it not?
Well, I don't think they'll give it to him. Do you? I think this. No. Remember, the Nobel Committee gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Barack Obama before he'd even done anything. And I think Donald Trump could end all the wars in the world, and the Nobel Committee would not give him the Peace Prize. I think it's very unlikely. But it would be funny if so. It's almost a Tom Lehrer song, if you remember those, the ridiculousness of it all. But it just does seem to be a failure of thought. Why is it that the left have become more marxist? The Guardian newspaper, which used during all my teens and 20s and youth, used to be the newspaper against war, sceptical of government, against the establishment, has now become the Warmongers Gazette. And the Labour Party, which used to be full of people, either of the Tam DL sort who asked awkward questions, or of the Tony Benn sort who had a natural bent for being suspicious of war, is now full of people who, whenever any war is proposed, start baying for it instantly. And yet, on the other side of the House of Commons and on the other side of the media as well, the people who ought to be saying, hang on a minute, is it real? Why is it exactly that Britain is getting involved in a war with Russia, a country with which we have almost no contact at all under normal circumstances? What is our interest in having a war between Russia and Ukraine extended? And when we see somebody trying to end it, why are we so keen on keeping it going? What is it in the minds of conservative people in Britain which makes them think that this is what they ought to be doing? War is actually the enemy of conservatism. It always has been. It does terrible damage to free societies. And
okay, Peter Hitchens, we have to leave it there. Excellent article. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. Thought-provoking as ever, Peter Hitchens. Beautiful stuff. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun this year, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's an unsettled story across some parts of Western Europe as we go through the next couple of days. There's the risk of some heavy, thundery rain bringing some flooding. There's a system pushing into Portugal, western Spain, and that's bringing some intense rain. Also, some heavy rain already affecting eastern parts of Spain, so further totals building up, causing more issues. More unsettled weather across parts of the Mediterranean, though further east towards Greece it's looking largely dry. Then quite a mixed bag when we head through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, it is going to be turning cloudier with some showers and also some longer spells of rain. But with more cloud in the skies, that means things aren't going to be turning quite as chilly as they have done recently. And it's all as a result of low pressure dragging in some frontal systems, so bringing in more cloud and also some outbreaks of rain overnight. Firstly into the west, and then it slowly pushes its way eastwards. But plenty of dry and clear spells across parts of central and southeastern England. So turning a little bit chillier here, could possibly see once again another patchy frost by the morning. And then towards dawn, once again across Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, we could see some patchy frost here as skies begin to clear. But across northern parts of England, northern parts of Wales in particular, plenty of low cloud and some damp weather to start on Friday. Across Scotland, though, a slightly drier picture. As I mentioned, some clearer skies, which means some patchy frost at times. I can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north of Scotland too. Once again, a brighter start across Northern Ireland, but for much of northern England, parts of Wales, still plenty of low cloud, likely going to be quite a murky start with some outbreaks of rain, similar across parts of Cornwall too. But for East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent, a brighter but chillier start. And then through the course of the day, that's where we'll see the best of the brightness, so more sunny skies on offer. But for many, it's going to be a much cloudier day, quite damp at times too, but brightening up later across parts of Scotland as well. So Scotland, the southeast, that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine, but for many, it's going to be a much cloudier and murky day on offer, particularly across parts of the west. But temperatures still widely above average, so highs around 15, possibly 16 Celsius, where we see the sunshine stick around. Through into the evening, not much change, still plenty of cloud across the country, outbreaks of rain at times, mostly light rain and drizzle, and still some clearer skies across parts of the southeast. More sunshine to come as we head into next week, but temperatures dipping away, so seeing some colder nights and days on offer. Bye-bye.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, hot diggity dog. Crufts is officially underway. Over 18,000 dogs are expected to compete in the ultimate contest for the coveted Best in Show award. Well, joining us now from Birmingham is a reporter who always go the extra mile. Oh, looking a bit rough there. It's Jack Carson.
Yeah, I haven't suddenly changed appearance, Martin. This is Delta, who, as you can see, it's been a very knackering first day at Crufts for Delta. But Delta is a gun dog, and we're going to try, Martin, and give you a little bit of a display if Delta will get up. Come on, Delta, come on. We're joined with Claudia. Claudia, thank you for joining us. Just kind of talk us through what we're going to be doing.
So we're going to just take you through a little bit of what we do in our gun dog training. We're going to start off with some sit stays because they're super important for our steadiness when we're out on shoots. Okay. And then we're going to do some retrieving.
Well, let's do the first bit then. What do we need to do?
So you're going to pop her in a sit, you're going to slip her off the lead, and then we're going to start moving away and coming back to reward her to make it a really positive experience.
All right, Delta, sit, stay. We move back. Okay.
And then you're just going to go back forward to it and then go and reward her.
Okay. Well done, Delta. Well done. So we're just going to reward Delta with a little treat for being a very good girl.
So now you're going to leave her again.
And now we're going to leave her again. Look at this. This is a fantastic obedience from Delta.
So we want to start changing your body language now so that it's not just too static and too sort of boring. So you need to get silly now.
Do I?
Yeah,
okay.
You do.
Okay. We're going to move around a bit, Martin. Look at this, Martin. It's still staying. Delta's still staying. Delta's still staying. This is fantastic obedience. We'll walk up to Delta and we'll give him a bit of a treat as well for being a perfect good boy here at Crufts. And we'll just finish. We'll give a reward. Go on. We'll chuck Delta.
Chuck a retriever.
Chuck a retriever.
And then tell her to go get it.
Go get it. And there we go, Martin. Off Delta goes. A 10 out of 10 performance for Delta. A good boy here at Crufts, and I think he deserves another treat, Martin.
Jack Carson, keep it up, mate, and you'll be in that dog agility contest yourself. Beautiful stuff. You're the absolute nuts. That is Jack Carson there, live from Crufts. Now, coming up, the Reform UK party on the rocks. Well, supposedly a civil war seems to be brewing between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's news channel. But now it's time for your weather, and it's magnificent out there.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, it is going to be turning cloudier with some showers and also some longer spells of rain. But with more cloud in the skies, that means things aren't going to be turning quite as chilly as they have done recently. And it's all as a result of low pressure dragging in some frontal systems, so bringing in more cloud and also some outbreaks of rain overnight. Firstly into the west, and then it slowly pushes its way eastwards. But plenty of dry and clear spells across parts of central and southeastern England. So turning a little bit chillier here, could possibly see once again another patchy frost by the morning. And then towards dawn, once again across Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, we could see some patchy frost here as skies begin to clear. But across northern parts of England, northern parts of Wales in particular, plenty of low cloud and some damp weather to start on Friday. Across Scotland, though, a slightly drier picture. As I mentioned, some clearer skies, which means some patchy frost at times. I can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north of Scotland too. Once again, a brighter start across Northern Ireland, but for much of northern England, parts of Wales, still plenty of low cloud, likely going to be quite a murky start with some outbreaks of rain, similar across parts of Cornwall too. But for East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent, a brighter but chillier start. And then through the course of the day, that's where we'll see the best of the brightness, so more sunny skies on offer. but for many it's going to be a much cloudier day, quite damp at times too, but brightening up later across parts of Scotland as well. So Scotland, the southeast, that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine, but for many it's going to be a much cloudier and murky day on offer, particularly across parts of the west. But temperatures still widely above average, so highs around 15, possibly 16 Celsius, where we see the sunshine stick around. Through into the evening, not much change, still plenty of cloud across the country, outbreaks of rain at times, mostly light rain and drizzle, and still some clearer skies across parts of the southeast. More sunshine to come as we head into next week, but temperatures dipping away, so seeing some colder nights and days on offer. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In South Yorkshire, the M1 northbound is partly blocked for emergency repairs. They're taking place between junction 34 at Meadowhall and 35 for Rotherham and the A629 turn-off. In Manchester, the M61 northbound is partly blocked for repairs at junction 1 for the M60. In the West Midlands, the M6 northbound has 2 lanes shut. There's a vehicle on fire there just after junction 6 for Birmingham and the A38. And in Warwickshire, the M6 northbound also partly blocked. There's been a collision there involving a lorry and a car, and it's happened just by junction 4A for the M42 with queues back to junction 4 at Coes Hill.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you on this wonderful afternoon. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, after reforms, Rupert Lowe appeared to doubt Nigel Farage. The Tories today are claiming that reform is at warfare due to egos and personal ambition. Is reform on the rocks? And this afternoon, a group of 40 Labour rebel MPs who objected to Rachel Reeves's inheritance tax hike are being carpeted by party whips in a meeting in Whitehall. On today's show, we will speak to the leader of Labour's Rural Revolt, the Member of Parliament. Plus, I'll be joined in the studio by the farmer who says this is the biggest breakthrough for farmers so far in our struggle. And we have some breaking news for you this afternoon. The triple murderer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty of raping his ex-partner in an attack. We saw him kill her and her sister with a crossbow and then go on to kill their mother with a butcher's knife. That's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. So we had the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp on the show an hour ago saying there is warfare within Reform UK, saying that egos and personal clashes, personal ambitions are getting in the way between the two people you can see on your screen there. Rupert Lowe, the outspoken MP for Great Yarmouth, and party leader Nigel Farage. But is this just the Tories whipping a frenzy up, or is this something genuine? And I said to Chris Philp earlier on, is it not a bit rich for the Conservatives to be talking about party division when Mr Farage no doubt would concur that the Tory party itself is divided between those who would belong in the Liberal Democrats and those who are true Conservatives? It's been quite a week, has it not, for parties of all stripes turning their guns on Reform UK. Plastic patriots, said Ed Davey and the Liberal Democrats. And yesterday, an astonishing outburst in this studio from Mike Tapp from the Labour Party, also calling Mr Farage a false patriot. Is there anything in this? Or, as Nigel Farage likes to say, you only get flag when you're above the target? Are the parties running scared of reform and that's why they're turning their wrath upon them? Or is something afoot? Does the Reform Party have something of a discipline issue that needs to be nipped in the bud? Get in touch usual ways. Let me know your thoughts on this. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do it. But now's your headlines, and it's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 4. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Breaking news this hour, as you've been hearing, triple killer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. The 26-year-old was found guilty by a jury at Cambridge Crown Court after around 45 minutes. Clifford had previously denied rape. Clifford was previously found guilty of murdering Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt at their home in Bushey in July last year. We'll bring you more on that breaking news shortly. Another brief breaking update now. The 10-year-old girl killed after being hit by a car on a sports pitch has been named as Poppy Atkinson from Kendal, Cumbria Constabulary has said. Police say the death after Poppy was struck by an electric car at Kendal Rugby Club is not thought to have been a deliberate act. An 8-year-old girl was also hit by the vehicle and was taken to hospital for treatment to injuries that are not life-threatening. A man in his 40s, the driver of a black BMW, was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Elsewhere, the UK government has signed a deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea, the Ministry of Defence have announced. That announcement comes as Sir Keir Starmer, speaking in the northwest of England, said it would be a, quote, big mistake to think that, quote, all we've got to do is wait for a deal now between Ukraine and Russia, adding that the United Kingdom will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels today to discuss Ukraine and the threat of Russia, with President Macron and President Zelensky meeting this morning. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, spoke to GB News' Catherine Forster a short time ago.
We've enjoyed 80 years of peace, and we've enjoyed 80 years of peace because we've had such a close relationship with the United States. We are closer than any other country to the United States when it comes to our defence, our security, our intelligence sharing, and we've worked with our European partners within NATO, which is the most important alliance the world has ever seen. And we've never made that choice between siding, as it were, with the US or with Europe. Historically, we've never done that. Churchill didn't do it, Attlee didn't do it, and it's certainly not the right thing to do now when things are extremely volatile.
An update from the White House now. They say that no decision has been made at this time on the legal status for Ukrainians in the US. That comes as President Trump's administration has confirmed that they suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine as France has stepped in to offer intelligence. The White House said yesterday that it is reconsidering its pause in funding for Ukraine, and talks between the United States and President Zelensky's country over a minerals deal are ongoing. Defence Secretary John Healey is meeting his counterpart, Pete Hegseth, today in Washington. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has urged the Sentencing Council to reconsider its new guidance for judges to take account of a criminal's ethnicity before deciding their punishment as soon as possible, adding that she will review its powers and change the law if necessary. That comes as Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch also said her party would back a change in the law to overrule the Sentencing Council. The changes due in April would place more emphasis on pre-sentence reports, particularly for offenders from ethnic or faith minorities, young adults, abuse survivors and pregnant women. The Sentencing Council says its reforms aim to ensure consistency and avoid bias in the justice system. Robert Jenrick told GB News earlier on that the government needs to intervene.
It's completely outrageous and ludicrous, and it needs to stop. And frankly, the Justice Secretary should have known about this before, if indeed she didn't. She has a personal representative on the very Sentencing Council that issued these guidance. I've read the minutes. There was no objection raised whatsoever. The government have got to intervene and stop this, because I don't want a two-tier justice system.
Irish Taoiseach Michael Martin said that his country will help Sir Keir Starmer do anything to reset the UK's relationship with the European Union. The Prime Minister has met with the Taoiseach as part of the first annual summit between the two nations, with Sir Keir Starmer saying the UK and Ireland are opening the next chapter in their relationship. The leaders were in the northwest with senior government members to discuss defence and the economy, with the Irish Premier adding a short time ago that the summit was very positive. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Martin.
Thank you, Katie. Now, another rural revolt is in the offing because around 40 Labour MPs are urging today the Chancellor Rachel Reeves to change her inheritance tax plans for family farms. And these rebel politicians are meeting Treasury Minister James Murray today. Now, this includes Labour MP Henry Tufnell for Mid and South Pembrokeshire. And earlier today, he spoke to GB News as political editor Chris Hope has had this to say.
Yes, they get all the whips happy with you as a new MP, being prickly on this policy.
Well, yeah, there's always the rough and tumble of politics, but fundamentally, Keir Starmer talked about country first, party second, and I've got a lot of farmers in my seat. I've engaged them extensively over a long period of time, and I was elected by them to come to Westminster to stand up for them, and I'm standing by them now.
Ooh, do we have the beginnings here of a Labour Party rift, a rural revolt? Henry Tufnell speaking to Chris Hope. And by the way, Chris Hope is currently over at Downing Street at Lobby trying to get a news line on this meeting. It sounds like 40 MPs might be getting carpeted by top brass for daring to speak out. And I'm joined now in the studio in Westminster by one of the leaders of the Rebel Farmers Alliance, Ollie Harris. I know you hate being called a leader and a rebel, but that's the way it's fallen. Let's get back to this story. When I spoke to you earlier this morning, you were very, very clear to me, Ollie, you think this is a significant breakthrough, in fact, the most positive thing that's come out of the protesting thus far.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can see, 40 of them have grown a pair and now decided to think, hold on a second, we're out of a job in 3 years or whatever, 4 years, unless we actually represent our constituents. And that's what they're doing, which is great. They've been listening. The problem we've got and what we've found out over the last few weeks is that the Treasury is so city centre based. They haven't got a clue. They think they're right, and they think that everyone's just a silly peasant talking to them. And now they're being told, and hopefully they'll listen.
Henry Tufnell, of course, is independently wealthy, a bit like Rupert Lowe in many senses. They can say what they like. But he was clear there to Chris Hope. He is being barraged by angry farmers in his constituency. No doubt all these other 40 Labour MPs are too. The big question is, what happens next? Do you think we're seeing now a fundamental schism, an impasse? The rural MPs are being barraged by angry farmers and know that they're kind of walking a gangplank. And then we have a very London-centric, metropolitan, city-dwelling top brass in the party. Never the twain shall meet. What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, if the rural MPs can't get through to the city centre MPs that seem to be running the Treasury, give it a month And when there's empty shelves, the other MPs will realise, the city centre MPs will suddenly think, oh, actually, yeah, we do need these farmers. We do need to protect these farms.
You think that's the way it might be heading?
Well, that's the next move, yeah. We've educated the public now. They understand it. The Treasury, though, they must be getting it from all angles. They've just still got the fingers in their ears. Well, they're going to have to open their eyes soon.
It was astonishing, was it not? I know, a completely different situation, but during COVID lockdowns, when people had, things like toilet paper shortages, and people went into panic buying, and it really, really had an impact. And the politicians, just as we saw, by the way, back in 2000, when Tony Blair also came up against a rural revolt, you and I talk about this often, Ollie, that time when the farmers joined up with the road haulage lads and the fuel depots, and we started to see an upscaling. Food shortages, something tangible. Nobody wants to see Britain looking like Moscow in the 1950s.
No, and hopefully there'll be some progress made this afternoon, and they'll think about that. But you see, some of these working in the Treasury aren't old enough to remember this, which is quite scary, really. But remember that toilet roll, you can leave it in your garage for years. You can't leave bread in your garage for years, can you?
What do you think is going to happen today? What do people tell? You're well connected, with MPs and farmers. People are telling you stuff all the time. Come on, spill the beans. What are MPs telling you about what they're expecting today? How angry are some of these MPs about this disconnect between the rural MPs and the top brass?
Anyone that's got any sort of agriculture within their constituency, they can't get anything done because they're just going back and just getting completely bombarded, and they get it. There's no doubt about it. They don't get it. But we do need to work on these city MPs now. Were there any of them city MPs within them 40, what we're calling rebels, or I'd call them brave MPs that are actually doing what they were elected to do? Then we'll just have to see, won't we? We'll know more later on today.
And this story broke earlier on this morning in the Times when you and I were communicating, and the Labour Party whip seems to be saying these MPs need to understand that they were elected on a Labour ticket. They weren't elected individually. The message we're getting so far, and I think we're going to get Chris Hope up in a minute, he's been in the lobby meeting speaking to number 10. The message seems to be that they're going to stand firm if you want to have a rural revolt, if you want to go against Keir Starmer, then they might be threatened with losing the whip.
Yeah, potentially, but you see, will Keir just do the maths and think, oh, well, we can lose 40? Are they that arrogant? Maybe they are.
You don't think it would come to that?
I don't know, it's an interesting day, isn't it?
So you think it will come to that? You think this will get juicier?
Well, I know the NFU met last week week before, was it? With Murray, and come out very disappointed, just dead behind the eyes. They couldn't get in to understand any of the human consequences around that, and that's without the food production.
OK, Ollie Harrison, you stay right where you are, because we are now joined by our political Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome back to the show. So, the message in the studio here in Westminster from Ollie Harrison from the farmers, they're absolutely sick of it, and talking here about potential food shortages being the next direction of travel. Do you have any news for us from what may have happened in that meeting earlier on with these rebel MPs and Labour top brass?
Ken's deputy official spokesman says they aren't aware of this meeting, and they have simply restated the policy, the changes to agricultural property relief and business property relief, making clear that in their world, and Ollie won't like this, but only a quarter of those would pay, and most would not be caught by these changes. I know that is disputed by the farmers. In other news, though, in the lobby just now, we understand that 20 countries are now in talks about joining this coalition of the willing against Ukraine. We're expecting a conference call tomorrow, attended by the Prime Minister. This is developing at some pace in government and in Europe to try and construct a coalition to convince Donald Trump that he should support and be this security backstop for a peacekeeping force in Ukraine to stop the killing there. And also there's been movement on the issue of the Sentencing Council. Now, viewers and listeners will remember that this council has recommended that the rules are changed for judges, so when they're sentencing people from ethnic minority religions and other groups, they should take into account their background when sentencing, and that does not apply to white men
that has been challenged by Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary. We've heard earlier that Robert Jennings, the Shadow Justice Secretary, wants to take that to judicial review. Well, he may not need to, because Shabana Mahmood has written to them asking for reconsideration of these guidelines, and also the Justice Secretary is looking at the powers of the Sentencing Council and seeking an urgent meeting of all involved. It's urgent because the plans come in on April the 1st. It looks like this is one argument which the Tories and Labour agree on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris Hope, there for that update from Downing Street. 20 countries expected to join that coalition of the willing, and pushback from Shabana Mahmood on two-tier justice allegations. Of course, huge pushback from the public on that today. Before I let you go, Ollie, let's get your reaction to what was said there. They're not talking about it, and they're just doubling down on the existing messaging. A small percentage of farmers pay this inheritance tax hike. But there was another development earlier on today, wasn't there? There's a freedom of information request has been leaked out. We spoke to the person who got there. We're hoping to get them on the show later in the week. Complete shedding doubt over Labour Party's figures. Tell us more on that front.
Is it lies or stupidity? Their own departments have disputed the figures, whether it be DEFRA or AHDB, or, we've put them to them, NFU, everyone's put them to them. They either don't understand it and shouldn't be in the job, or they're lying.
OK, thank you very much, Ollie Harrison. And that FOI confirmed, it seemed to confirm that the estimates were based on historical data, and no impact assessment was carried out on present-day farms and what that may achieve in terms of the relief and how many people will be affected. Ollie Harrison, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. It was a pleasure to have your company. Now, let's move on now, and I'm joined by the political consultants and the Labour councillor, Dominic Moffat. Dominic, welcome to the show. So the rural MPs are revolting. 40 of them are getting barracked by farmers in their constituents. They're going back to Labour HQ, however, and the metropolitan top brass are not listening. It's falling on deaf ears.
Well, good afternoon, Martin. And if I'm going to be honest, one of the things that's really clear is that the government is supporting British farmers. They've already they're changing the rules to ensure that the government buys half of its food produce from British farmers. That means supporting higher quality produce with better welfare standards. They've put £110 million into investing in modern technology to ensure that farmers are using the most up-to-date technology, farming in the most efficient manners. They're spending £200 million on biosecurity. That's to make sure that farms that farm today can continue to farm for generations to come. And, unlike the last government, they're not selling out British farmers to foreign trade deals.
Dominic, if everything is so tickety-boo, if everything is so happy down on the farm, how come thousands of farmers keep turning up week after week after week here in Westminster saying the precise opposite?
Well, the thing is that there are lots of people who would be concerned by the risk of this, but the reality of the situation is that it's only a very small number of farms that are affected. It's very important to point out that actually it's, in most cases, it's only farms worth more than £3 million that are affected by this. And I think we can all agree that anybody with assets worth more than £3 million is not exactly on the breadline.
But the point is, those assets are land assets or machinery assets, things that may be leased, things that may be expensive, and things which your own leader said at the NFU conference before the general election would not fall under the remit of inheritance tax hikes. Farms are different, he said. They're not the same as an ordinary business because it's about food sovereignty, it's about continuity, it's about keeping those intergenerational farms safe. And there was a complete and utter backtrack on that policy once the Labour Party got into power.
Well, I think Keir and Steve Reid have stuck by that, because the fact is that whereas a normal estate would be hit at 1 million if we're talking about a combined rate, this is about 3 million that is affected after that. It's affected at half the rate of normal inheritance tax, only a 20% bill, and it can be paid off over 10 years. That is treating it differently.
Dominic, can I quickly interject? I have Ollie Harrison here, one of the farmer leaders, and he's saying the next stage could be food shortages. There won't be food on the shelves if the Labour Party don't change their position. How do you feel about that? Food shortages because you won't help farmers?
Well, the fact is that we are helping farmers, and we're helping everyone in the British economy by fixing the £22 billion black hole left by the last Conservative government, and people won't be able to afford food if we don't fix that hole.
OK, we almost got through that without you mentioning the £22 billion black hole, but thank you very much, Labour Councillor Dominic Moffat and Ollie Harrison. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. And let's return now to that breaking news we brought you earlier around Kyle Clifford. He's been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner, Louise Hunt. Our national reporter, Charlie Peters, has all the latest. Charlie, bring us up to speed.
Well, Martin, there was applause in the public gallery in Cambridge Crown Court this afternoon as the jury returned with a unanimous verdict after just 50 minutes after a trial was sitted at that court this week, returning that guilty verdict of rape for Kyle Clifford. Now, he had already pleaded guilty to several crimes previously. On the 22nd of January, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of possession of an offensive weapon, including the crossbow he used to kill Louise and Hannah Hunt, and the knife he used to kill their mother, Carol. He also pleaded guilty to 1 count of false imprisonment in relation to Louise Hunt, and he has now been convicted today of 1 count of rape. That unanimous verdict being returned after 50 minutes. He will be sentenced for all of his crimes on Tuesday, and he is facing multiple whole life orders. Now, the evidence at the court has been difficult to hear for the family, but they did attend the full trial. And John Hunt, the BBC racing commentator and the husband of Carol Hunt, he also attended the trial, listening to that information of the violent attack on his family. But Kyle Clifford, who used a crossbow and a knife to murder members of John Hunt's family, has today been found guilty of rape. He will be sentenced on Tuesday.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie Peters, bringing us to speed on that distressing case. Thank you very, very much. Now, coming up next, should we kick out the football governance bill? Keep politics out of football. That gets my vote. And Baroness Claire Fox joins me next in the studio. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I watched the video yesterday with Meghan Markle announcing this relaunch. What did you make of the video?
It's constantly this rebranding thing that's going on, which is quite interesting. We've had different kind of, way back to Sussex Royal at the very beginning. Here we've now got this new lifestyle series that's coming out. Obviously, she's got this new brand that's going to go alongside it. It's very difficult because royals, as we've said many, many times before, this is not something royals typically kind of do. And obviously these are no longer, if you like, working members of the royal family, but still Prince Harry, as I keep saying, is a senior member of the royal family. So it's quite a kind of uncharted territory that they're going into. And as I said, this is a bit of a disaster because everything they seem to kind of do when it comes to branding, it just doesn't seem to work.
They seem to really be struggling to find their purpose in the US. Do you think that's fair? I mean, Prince Harry, of course, has got the Invictus Games, which is just the most wonderful thing that he has set up. But it appears that they're not obviously part of the royal family anymore in terms of working royals. They're not senior working royals, but not able to make it in the business world yet either.
You're right, Elliot. I think the Invictus Games is definitely the kind of saving grace. That's the thing that everybody kind of admires and respects them for. But then it's when they keep going back into this kind of celebrity branded lifestyle. I don't think anyone's really that hugely interested. As you said, in the States, you kind of hear people are for them, people are against them. I think most people would rather that they went kind of doing this. I think we've said this so many times before that, as members of the royal family, they should continue down that line and going into this kind of business world. It just, I think I'm right in saying historically with royals and kind of business, it doesn't really work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:26 on this glorious afternoon with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, should we kick politics out of the beautiful game of football? Well, I certainly think so, because the Football Governance Bill heading to the House of Lords next week, and a new independent regulator could shake up the game. But fans, owners and managers are raising their concerns. And joining me now to discuss those concerns is the director of the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox. Claire, an absolute pleasure to have your company as ever. Now, a lot of people watching this show can't stand any form of politics in sport. Pride armbands, taking the knee. That's a step too far for most people. But when you talk about politics actually getting involved in the running of clubs, in the governance of clubs, for many people, it's simply unacceptable. Tell us your concerns about this new bill.
So the worst thing is, you've given the example of taking the knee and armbands. Can you imagine a situation where you'll have a new law that will basically say that you could lose your licence as a football team if you don't enact equality, diversity and inclusion policies,
Madness.
right? Lose a licence. It's a licensing scheme. And the reason I was keen to come on, Martin, I'm delighted to be here, is because this Football Governance Bill is trundling through. It's in the House of Lords at the last stage. Then it will go to the House of Commons. I want to say to people who are watching, find out about it. Yeah. It's scary. They say they're helping fans out. They say it's for the small teams.
Of course.
They use all the prejudice about the very rich Premier League and all the rest of it. But what it amounts to is a government regulator with unprecedented powers being able to interfere in the governance of your football team, say what money they should spend, whether they should take a risk on buying a player that's too expensive, warn against it if they think that you're too risky. All of this stuff, can you imagine? This is a competitive game. And what's more is, English football's really successful.
Yeah.
It's a very successful industry that this country exports all around the world. So guess what? The government want to interfere in it. It's madness. And I want fans to find out more about it.
Now, this has been on the cards. Like Jeremy Corbyn liked this idea. The idea almost of like unionising the boardroom, getting fans involved. It sounds great, except, you know, they are extremely successful, multi-billion-pound industries. Fans can't run that. No. The government can't run that. The government can't run a council. How on earth can they run a Premier League football team?
And that's my concern. And the thing that's occurred is that they've said, oh, well, because, I mean, you know, some football teams have nearly gone bust, right? And when you think about what happened to Bury, and people understand that football is part and parcel of the community, the heart and soul of many local areas. So, of course, when they hear a government minister say, and by the way, the Tories started it, I just do want to point out, but the version that Labour have brought back is worse. And when they sort of say, oh, we're only doing this to help the fans out, I'm afraid that what they're really doing is giving enormous state power to say what should and shouldn't happen in football. And there could be serious consequences. UEFA, for example, have sent a letter to the government saying what their concerns are. And guess what? The government won't publish the letter. They're keeping it quiet.
Why not?
Now,
what have they got to hide?
Indeed, a question that's been asked in the House of Lords quite a number of times. And they say, oh, don't worry. Now, of course, if UEFA have got very strict rules on no government or political interference in football, and it's quite feasible that English football teams could be kept out of European football as a consequence. But the main thing is that it's trying to, as it were, make football, you're going to believe this, fairer. Now, I mean, we can all go, oh, those footballers are earning a fortune, and that club, everyone can shout about Liverpool and compare it to the small one. But apart from anything else, it's the competition. There isn't one even lowest league club that doesn't want to be in the Premier League. Part of it is the dream of fighting to get up. That's how the pyramid works. And the truth is, the Premier League, to a certain extent, even though it's massively, hugely rich and all the rest of it, and there's things that I don't like, nonetheless, there is a pyramid. and the money does trickle down. And if you start disrupting it, or largely having a regulator that can tell football management how to run, they're even having a situation where they can stop certain people becoming officers of football clubs. So you can't even appoint your own people. They can redistribute the money of a major club. They can say, that's too much money, you've got to give more to lower league clubs. I mean, redistribution of wealth by the back door. And I think that fans, so I've written a long essay explaining all this, and there's a podcast as well, because I just want fans to find out about it. You don't have to agree with me, but find out, because it's happening behind the scenes. And the academyofideas.org Substack, just have a read of it.
Yeah.
Find out, alert your fellow fans, so that when it gets to the Commons, you can all lobby your MPs and say, not in our name.
I don't think that fans are aware of what's going on. I mean, I don't think they're aware of what's going on right in front of their noses. The government telling clubs how to be run, the government insisting on equality and diversity within the governance and the running of clubs, who you can sign. This is astonishing. The state seems to be having its tendrils in every part of our lives. The terraces is where we go to get away from politics, Claire Fox.
I know, well, that's the problem. I mean, as we know, there's already been a wide range of rules that say that the kind of things that football fans chant are going to be policed. You know, we have banter police. We actually have people like Lindsay Smith, who people will know about, the Newcastle United football fan. She actually got banned by her own football club,
that's right.
Newcastle United, because she tweeted something, or she posted on X, as we now say, about her gender-critical views that men can't be women and women can't be men, etc. And they banned her from football. She wasn't saying anything. She didn't say anything on the terraces. She's an absolute lifelong Newcastle United fan. She can't go to the football anymore. That was brought in under a trans-inclusion EDI rule that Newcastle United had got from you know, the Premier League. So I disagree with that. But if that becomes compulsory in every single club, those kind of behaviours, the fans are the ones who are going to be suffering here. And I think that what we need to do is to say, as you say, kick politics out of football. But at the moment, I want you to be political about football and make sure you know what's happening in your name in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords. And we start debating it on Tuesday in the House of Lords for the final round of amendments. Get involved.
Well, hopefully get shown the red card. Baroness Claire Fox, please come back and tell us how that gets on. So a great wake-up call. Now, listen out there. If the government's got its snout in your club, you might want to do something about it. I don't want them taking any involvement in my club. Do you? Well, the government said this bill was important as it will protect football clubs by ensuring their financial sustainability, as Claire Fox had just said. Lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including next we'll be debating, is Nigel Farage a so-called plastic patriot? That's what the Lib Dems are calling him. You'll not want to miss that. The first is your headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. Your top stories this hour. Breaking news, as you've been hearing, triple killer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. The 26-year-old was found guilty by a jury at Cambridge Crown Court after around 45 minutes. Clifford had previously denied rape. Clifford was previously found guilty of murdering Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt at their home in Bushey in July of last year. We'll bring you more on that breaking story as we get it. The 10-year-old girl killed after being hit by a car on a sports pitch has been named as Poppy Atkinson from Kendal, Cumbria Constabulary have said. Police say the death after Poppy was struck by an electric car at Kendal Rugby Club is not thought to have been a deliberate act. An 8-year-old girl was also hit by the vehicle and was taken to hospital for treatment to injuries that are not life-threatening. A man in his 40s, the driver of a black BMW, was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. A man will bring you more on that story as we get it. GB News understands this afternoon that 20 countries are in talks about joining a coalition of the willing to keep the peace in Ukraine. It was announced earlier today that the UK government has signed a deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea. Sir Keir Starmer said the UK will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. European Union leaders have met in Brussels today to discuss Ukraine and the threat of Russia, with President Macron and President Zelensky meeting earlier on. The Prime Minister spoke to GB News' Catherine Forster a short time ago.
We've enjoyed 80 years of peace. And we've enjoyed 80 years of peace because we've had such a close relationship with the United States. We are closer than any other country to the United States when it comes to our defence, our security, our intelligence sharing. And we've worked with our European partners within NATO, which is the most important alliance the world has ever seen. And we've never made that choice between siding, as it were, with the US or with Europe. Historically, we've never done that. Churchill didn't do it, Attlee didn't do it, and it's certainly not the right thing to do now when things are extremely volatile.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In South Yorkshire, the M1 northbound has 2 lanes shut for emergency repairs. They're taking place between junction 34 for Meadowhall and junction 35 for Rotherham and the A629 turn-off. In Manchester, there are long delays on the M61 northbound. That's partly blocked for repairs, and they're at junction 1 for the M60. In Warwickshire, the M6 northbound is partly blocked after a collision involving a lorry and a car, and that's happened just by junction 4A for the M42 interchange. And in Hampshire, the M27 eastbound is partly blocked after a collision between Southampton Airport junction 5 and junction 7 for Hedge End.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, yesterday on this very show, Labour slammed Nigel Farage as no patriot. Mike Tapp, the MP for Dover and Deal, steamed into the Reform UK leader, saying he doesn't even love Britain. Take a Butchers.
I'll be really clear on this, that Nigel Farage wraps himself in the flag, but he's no patriot, he's an opportunist. And we've also seen over the years him saying inappropriate comments around Putin and fawning over him. And that's not what British politicians are there to do. We're there to stand up for this country, and that's why that's being said.
Well, fighting talk. Well, all the big political parties are queuing up to put a boot into Nigel Farage. A false patriot was Reform's line. The Tory party, Priti Patel, comparing Mr Farage to Jeremy Corbyn, just when you think you've heard it all. And, of course, the Liberal Democrats calling Mr Farage a plastic patriot. Well, let's have a ding-dong about this now, because I'm joined in the studio by the former spokesman of Reform UK, Gawain Towler, and down the line by the former Liberal Democrat Minister, Norman Baker. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'm going to start with you, Norman Baker, because your leader, Ed Davey, and your party line has been putting out consistent messaging now. They've even made a little Action Man toy of Nigel Farage, calling him a plastic patriot. Why on earth are you saying that?
Well, look, I'm not saying that because I'm not party to what the Lib Dems put out nationally. As you know, I'm a former Lib Dem MP. What I would say in more measured language, perhaps, is this, that after we came out of the European Union, Nigel made it plain that his view was we should pivot towards the United States. Now, I thought that was personally unwise in the abstract because the United States relationship with Britain, although it's a very strong one historically, we would be at the back end of a penny farthing, whereas when we were with our colleagues in France and Germany and so on, we were more of an equal partnership and we got closer historical and trade links with those countries. So I thought it was unwise in the generality to put ourselves in that position. And what's happened since, of course, is that Trump has gone way off the scale and behaving in a way that I don't believe Nigel would actually want to see. To be fair to him, what we're seeing from Trump, let's take one example only. The UN vote Britain and France put forward to condemn Russian aggression in Ukraine, which is something I imagine nearly all GB News viewers would agree with. 4 countries voted against that: Russia, its sidekick Belarus, North Korea, and the United States. I mean, that's horrific. And
yeah, but you're talking about Donald Trump here. You're going slightly off point. But let's bring Gawain Towler in at this point. Gawain, you've been waiting. Have your say.
I mean, there's been a whole barrage of stuff from Labour, from the Lib Dems. It's quite nice to hear from the Lib Dems once in a while, because one doesn't hear from them much. And the Tories attacking Farage. Why? Because he is leading in the polls. Even in today's poll, they might have dropped a couple of points, but he's still leading in the Find Out Now poll. So Reform is still in the lead. They are an existential threat for the Tories and a threat for Labour. I mean, to be fair, any idea... I've never questioned the Lib Dems' patriotism. I disagree with what they have done. I disagree with the fact they want to throw a lotto with Europe. They want to rip down the Union Jack and fly up the blue flag. But I've never questioned their patriotism. I believe they love this country. They share a different love than, say, Farage does. But any query that something like Farage does not love his country after 30 years fighting for it, fighting for its independence, is outrageous and beyond contention. Now, even Labour, even Mike Tapp, he spent his time with the forces. I don't question his patriotism. How dare he question another man's patriotism? How dare he? It's beyond the pale. And it's unacceptable.
Norman Baker, isn't that a fair point to say that you can have a difference of opinion with people like Mr Farage, but it was he who went to Brussels to reclaim the Union flag, to stand up for the United Kingdom. It was people like yourselves, dare I say it, people like Keir Starmer, who fought for 3 years to reverse Brexit, that have happily surrendered our flag to the gold and blue of the European Union.
Well, it was never Lib Dem policy to pull down the Union Jack, Gawain. I have to say that. That's an extremely inaccurate statement. And also, if you listen carefully to what I said a moment ago, I didn't question Nigel's patriotism. What I said was that he effectively jumped on the wrong horse, not because... Well, historically, I think it was probably unwise to jump with the US, no matter who the president was. But I think it's proven to be much more unwise because of who Trump is. And I think because Trump is becoming so extreme, I don't think those are Nigel's views. Maybe they are. But, I mean, he can tell us if they are or not. But I don't think they are his views. And I think he's found himself tied to a horse that's going in the wrong direction.
Gwen.
Yes, I agree. Norman didn't say that. However... his party has, Labour Party has, the Tories have. So I'm sorry, Norman, you're being blamed for something that's not entirely your fault, and I accept that. However, and it's the headline at the bottom of the screen, but the point is that Farage has always been pro this country. Now, while this country was being suborned under the ECJ, under the European legal system, under things of this sort, then absolutely a fellow common law country with a common language that believes in free trade, believes in the sort of things we do, is a useful ally. And the fact is, it is the major ally. It's the major player in the Free West. Now, I agree entirely that there are things that it's doing at present that are not what we're used to. But they're returning the world to a world of sort of honesty, a world where power and money is reality and virtue signalling, which is all we've been doing for years. When I see the Prime Minister of Luxembourg saying we're foursquare behind you, Mr. Zelensky, what can Luxembourg do? And this sort of dream world we've been living in, international relations dream world, where particularly the European Union has bigged up its importance and yet denigrated its ability to actually act, has given its own energy security to Russia and then blames other countries for standing up to Russia. I find the whole thing very, very strange and hypocritical.
And Norman Baker, would you not take into account what somebody like Nigel Farage will say? He's said it all along. You only get flack when you're above the target. And there's been a joined-up attack this week, both from the Liberal Democrats, from the Labour Party, fawning to Putin, said Sir Keir Starmer, Mike Tapp, calling him a false patriot. Priti Patel comparing Nigel Farage to Jeremy Corbyn, just when you thought you'd heard it all. Is this the entire political establishment just joining up to keep out something which they see, perhaps, as a huge existential threat?
Well, there's 2 points, Martin, by way of I can come in on that. The first one is to say that if you're pro this country, and let's assume Nigel is, I've never said he isn't, let's assume he's pro this country. Donald Trump is not pro this country. Donald Trump is talking about wrecking the economy through tariffs, and he's talking about abandoning Europe's defence. We're in a completely different world with the US now to what we were before Trump came in. So we have to adjust to that. But in terms of the effect on Nigel and people ganging up on him, look, I mean, the fact of the matter is that it may be an existential threat to Labour. I think it probably is, and to the Tories in some ways. But it's not actually, to be brutal about it, an existential threat to the Lib Dems. Because what happens is the Tory voters come across to us, as we saw at the last election. So it doesn't matter to us electorally whether Nigel does well or not.
Okay, final words to you, Gawain Taylor.
Well, I think that's, to a certain extent, Norman's right there. We're not an existential threat to a party that is, 10 points behind us in the polls.
With 72 seats.
Agreed, but you used to believe in PR, didn't you? However, but the point is that the reason why they're all speaking the way they're, and to be fair, you're in politics. It's a tough game. If it worries you, grow a thicker skin. And Farage has a thick skin. This is, to a certain extent, a short-term issue. And it's there. Of course it's there. But he's not going to cower. This is not somebody who spent 30 years having rocks chucked at him, going to go, oh, no, there's some bad stuff in the press. Right. The other lot don't like us.
OK, we have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. A spirited debate, Gawain Taylor and Norman Baker. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Now, if you've been searching some winter sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's an unsettled story across some parts of Western Europe as we go through the next couple of days. There's the risk of some heavy, thundery rain bringing some flooding. There's a system pushing into Portugal, western Spain, and that's bringing some intense rain. Also, some heavy rain already affecting eastern parts of Spain, so further totals building up, causing more issues. More unsettled weather across parts of the Mediterranean, though further east towards Greece it's looking largely dry. Then quite a mixed bag when we head through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, it is going to be turning cloudier with some showers and also some longer spells of rain. But with more cloud in the skies, that means things aren't going to be turning quite as chilly as they have done recently. And it's all as a result of low pressure dragging in some frontal systems, so bringing in more cloud and also some outbreaks of rain overnight. Firstly into the west, and then it slowly pushes its way eastwards. But plenty of dry and clear spells across parts of central and southeastern England. So turning a little bit chillier here, could possibly see once again another patchy frost by the morning. And then towards dawn, once again across Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, we could see some patchy frost here as skies begin to clear. But across northern parts of England, northern parts of Wales in particular, plenty of low cloud and some damp weather to start on Friday. Across Scotland, though, a slightly drier picture. As I mentioned, some clearer skies, which means some patchy frost at times. I can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north of Scotland too. Once again, a brighter start across Northern Ireland, but for much of northern England, parts of Wales, still plenty of low cloud, likely going to be quite a murky start with some outbreaks of rain, similar across parts of Cornwall too. But for East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent, a brighter but chillier start, and then through the course of the day, that's where we'll see the best of the brightness, so more sunny skies on offer. But for many, it's going to be a much cloudier day, quite damp at times too, but brightening up later across parts of Scotland as well. So Scotland, the southeast, that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine, but for many it's going to be a much cloudier and murky day on offer, particularly across parts of the west. But temperatures still widely above average, so highs around 15, possibly 16 Celsius, where we see the sunshine stick around. Through into the evening, not much change, still plenty of cloud across the country, outbreaks of rain at times, mostly light rain and drizzle, and still some clearer skies across parts of the southeast. More sunshine to come as we head into next week, but temperatures dipping away, so seeing some colder nights and days on offer. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Birmingham cemeteries are falling into disrepair with overgrown grass, litter and neglected graves sparking fury. But local campaigner John Gilmore is leading the fight for change, calling up on the council to step up and sort this mess out. And I'm joined now by John Gilmore in the studio. John, welcome to the show. Tell me what inspired you to take this noble fight?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to come in, Martin, and talk about this. My local cemetery, Yardley in Birmingham, my gran passed away 20 years ago. She first purchased a grave in 1932 for her 7-year-old little boy who was killed by a bus. And the graves all around this location, the roads were covered with potholes. So that was my first challenge to the council. And we managed to eventually get those done. But then when I had a walk around and looked further afield, the neglect over decades was terrible, and it's just so disrespectful. Then it was a wider issue around the country.
And we're seeing some pictures on the screen there now of some of the graves that you've seen literally just shattered and fallen to one side, utterly neglected. Now, John, I understand you want to do something about this, as well as doing some amazing work. There's some huge pictures you've got there of you having restored graves, having done fundraisers to get children's graves brought back to the condition they so deserve to be in. But you started a petition to help people get involved. Tell us about that and how can people back you?
Well, the petition is on the Parliament website, so if you just type in cemetery petition, it starts with We Want to Preserve Cemeteries. It's 2 weeks live tomorrow. It's got 870 signatures, but ideally my dream for all those that are no longer here with us would be to get 100,000 signatures for those people that have contributed to the country in which we all live. They've left legacies behind. You've got babies, children, armed forces personnel, adults. They have all contributed to the country in which we still benefit from and live today. So it's for them.
It's a wonderful, wonderul clause. And can we quickly get that back on the screen again? The petition is there. You can get involved. I'll be signing that. I'll put it on my social media later on. Provide funding to preserve and protect cemeteries around the UK. What a fantastic cause, supported there by community campaigner John Gilmore. Thank you very much for coming to join me in the studio today. It's a pleasure to have your company and good luck with your cause. Now, next, are Reform UK wobbling? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But now here's your wonderful, glorious weather.
chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, it is going to be turning cloudier with some showers and also some longer spells of rain. But with more cloud in the skies, that means things aren't going to be turning quite as chilly as they have done recently. And it's all as a result of low pressure dragging in some frontal systems, so bringing in more cloud and also some outbreaks of rain overnight. Firstly into the west, and then it slowly pushes its way eastwards. But plenty of dry and clear spells across parts of central and southeastern England. So turning a little bit chillier here, could possibly see once again another patchy frost by the morning. And then towards dawn, once again across Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, we could see some patchy frost here as skies begin to clear. But across northern parts of England, northern parts of Wales in particular, plenty of low cloud and some damp weather to start on Friday. Across Scotland, though, a slightly drier picture. As I mentioned, some clearer skies, which means some patchy frost at times. I can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north of Scotland too. Once again, a brighter start across Northern Ireland, but for much of northern England, parts of Wales, still plenty of low cloud, likely going to be quite a murky start with some outbreaks of rain, similar across parts of Cornwall too. But for East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent, a brighter but chillier start. And then through the course of the day, that's where we'll see the best of the brightness, so more sunny skies on offer. But for many, it's going to be a much cloudier day, quite damp at times too, but brightening up later across parts of Scotland as well. So Scotland, the southeast, that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine, but for many, it's going to be a much cloudier and murky day on offer, particularly across parts of the west. But temperatures still widely above average, so highs around 15, possibly 16 Celsius, where we see the sunshine stick around. Through into the evening, not much change, still plenty of cloud across the country, outbreaks of rain at times, mostly light rain and drizzle, and still some clearer skies across parts of the southeast. More sunshine to come as we head into next week, but temperatures dipping away, so seeing some colder nights and days on offer. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In South Yorkshire, the M1 northbound has 2 lanes shut for emergency repairs. They're between junction 34 at Meadowhall and 35 for Rotherham and the A629. In Cheshire, there are 3 lanes shut on the M6 northbound. That's after a collision between junction 20 for the M56 and 21 for Woolston. In Manchester, the M61 northbound is partly blocked for emergency repairs. They're taking place at junction 1 for the M60, with queues back to the Trafford Centre. In Buckinghamshire, delays on the clockwise M25 after a collision near junction 16 for the M40, with queues back to junction 15 for the M4.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter. Just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out. Enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company. Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
A very, very good afternoon to you on this glorious afternoon. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, after Reform UK's Rupert Lowe appeared to doubt Nigel Farage in today's Daily Mail, the Tories are claiming that Reform is at warfare due to egos and personal ambition. Is that true? Or are they all running scared of Farage's upstart outfit? And this afternoon, a group of 40 Labour rebel MPs who object to Rachel Reeves' inheritance tax hike are being carpeted by party whips, according to our insiders. On today's show, we speak with a farmer who says this is the biggest breakthrough so far for the farming cause. And new judicial guidance that urges judges to go soft on ethnic minorities and trans people and go harsher on white people has been slammed as discriminating against straight white people. On today's show, I'll be joined by a barrister, Stephen Barrett, the magnificent Stephen Barrett, to ask this. Is this yet more example of two-tier justice? That's all coming in your next hour. Well, the show, it's a pleasure to have your company. Well, the knives are certainly out for Nigel Farage's Reform UK. They're queuing up to have a pop. Yesterday in the studio, Mike Tapp from the Labour Party accused Nigel Farage of being a false patriot. The Liberal Democrats called Mr Farage a plastic patriot. And today it is the Conservatives. We had the Shadow Home Secretary on the show, Chris Philp, saying Reform are a protest party without a plan, and only the Conservatives can save Britain. I put it to him, he had 14 years to do that. What were you waiting for? Today's debate is Reform on the rocks, or is it an example, as Mr Farage might say, of you only get flack when you're above the target? What do you think about this? Get involved. We'll be having a debate about this throughout the show. To get involved, it's gbnews.com/your say. Now it's your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 5. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. As you've been hearing this afternoon, triple killer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. The 26-year-old was found guilty by a jury at Cambridge Crown Court after around 45 minutes. Clifford had previously denied rape. He has previously admitted murdering Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt at their home in Bushey in July last year. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it. GB News understands this afternoon that 20 countries are in talks about joining a coalition of the willing to keep the peace in Ukraine. It was announced earlier today that the UK government has signed a deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea, the Ministry of Defence has announced. Sir Keir Starmer said the UK will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. Posting on X a short time ago, President Zelensky said that, quote, everyone must ensure that Russia, the sole source of this war, accepts the need to end it. He went on to add that the next step is basic trust in the circumstances in which the negotiations are taking place. The Prime Minister spoke to GB News' Catherine Forster a short time ago.
We've enjoyed 80 years of peace. And we've enjoyed 80 years of peace because we've had such a close relationship with the United States. We are closer than any other country to the United States when it comes to our defence, our security, our intelligence sharing. And we've worked with our European partners within NATO, which is the most important alliance the world has ever seen. And we've never made that choice between siding, as it were, with the US or with Europe. Historically, we've never done that. Churchill didn't do it, Attlee didn't do it, and it's certainly not the right thing to do now when things are extremely volatile.
An update from the White House a short time ago. They say that there is no decision at this time on the legal status for Ukrainians in the US. That comes as President Trump's administration has confirmed that they suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine as France stepped in to offer intelligence. The White House said yesterday that it is reconsidering its pause in funding for Ukraine, and talks between the United States and President Zelensky's country over a minerals deal are ongoing. Defence Secretary John Healey is meeting his counterpart, Pete Hegseth, today in Washington. The 10-year-old girl killed after being hit by a car on a sports pitch has been named as Poppy Atkinson from Kendal, Cumbria Constabulary have said. Police say the death after Poppy was struck by an electric car at Kendal Rugby Club is not thought to have been a deliberate act. An 8-year-old girl was also hit by the vehicle and was taken to hospital for treatment to injuries that are not life-threatening. A man in his 40s, the driver of a black BMW, was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has urged the Sentencing Council to reconsider its new guidance for judges to take account of a criminal's ethnicity before deciding their punishment as soon as possible, adding that she will review its powers and change the law if necessary. That comes as Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch also said her party would back a change in the law to overrule the Sentencing Council. The changes due in April would place more emphasis on pre-sentence reports, particularly for offenders from ethnic or faith minorities, young adults, abuse survivors and pregnant women. The Sentencing Council says its reforms aim to ensure consistency and avoid bias in the justice system. Robert Jenrick told GB News earlier on that the government needs to intervene.
It's completely outrageous and ludicrous, and it needs to stop. And frankly, the Justice Secretary should have known about this before, if indeed she didn't. She has a personal representative on the very Sentencing Council that issued these guidance. I've read the minutes. There was no objection raised whatsoever. The government have got to intervene and stop this, because I don't want a two-tier justice system.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you, Katie. Now, the topic of conversation today is this. Is Reform UK on the rocks, or is simply taking flack because they're leading in the polls? Well, the Tories are claiming that the Reform are on a wobble after Reform MP Rupert Lowe has said that Nigel Farage acts like a messiah and needs to learn how to delegate. And that was in the Mail today with our colleague Andrew Pearce. And he also said that if there were not changes, then he would not be by Farage's side at the next election. Well, lots to discuss, and I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. So, Chris, you're calling this a triple whammy of explosions on the horizon for Reform UK and Mr Farage. Let's go through them one by one. Let's start with something of a rift, some might say, between Mr Lowe and Mr Farage. Tell us more.
Rupert Lowe is one of the 5 Reform UK MPs. He's making a lot of running in the House of Commons with interesting questions about benefits and who's claiming benefits, and so it goes on. Elon Musk has said he'd be a good leader, possibly, by casting shade on Nigel Farage. He's given an interview to our colleague Andrew Pearce at the Daily Mail, in which he's been pretty clear on his views. He thinks that let's put it up on my screen here, but on the screen now, we'll see them come on screen now. I'm barely 6 months into being an MP, he says. I'm in the betting to be the next Prime Minister. That's to replace Farage, of course. It's absolutely staggering, he says. I don't know where this has come from. You're seeing on screen now what Rupert Lowe has said to the Daily Mail. And a second quotation, which is also setting hairs running here. We have to start developing policy, he says, which is going to change the way we govern. I'm not going to be by Nigel's side at the next election unless we have a proper plan to change the way we govern from top to bottom. Now, that in political terms is an attempt at, putting a target on Farage's back as the leader. So that's happened today, and that comes as question marks.
Let's just quickly, because we had Chris Philp on the show earlier on, of course, the Shadow Home Secretary. Of course, the Conservatives are making hay over this, saying this was warfare at the top of Reform. They're more concerned with their own egos and advancing their personal ambitions rather than standing up for the British people. But of course, they would say that. And when we had Mr. Philp on earlier, I was quick to point out, well, you had 14 years to solve all of this, and you got quite a kicking from reform.
One thing Chris Philp did say I thought was fascinating is, what will Nigel do about Rupert Lowe? What will Nigel Farage do? Will he take on Rupert Lowe's apparent, in these quotes, disloyalty and discipline him, as would happen in a normal political party? In a sense, Reform UK is a party that's growing up in real time.
Yeah, we had a statement on there. That was from the Labour Party, and they're also attacking them on the NHS. We're going to see a lot of this.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to see the Labour Party
because they're leading in the polls. It's what happens. So both Labour and Reform have been keen to say, call it warfare. Both parties call it warfare with these quotes. This is what happens if you're leading in the polls. You can't expect to get a free run at it if you're Nigel Farage and his team. Donations announced today from the Electoral Commission. This covers October to December. The new Treasurer came in, Nick Candy, for Reform at the back end of that period. It looks, well, according to the official figures, the Tories, for every £6 raised by the Tories, Reform raised just £1. So they're somewhat behind where they want to be in terms of pulling money in. And the third leg of this issue today with this party...
Well, before we move on to that, let's just quickly deal with the funding issue. So this is the back end of last year. Mr. Candy came in middle of December, and there has been a significant surge of memberships, £25 a pop, since then. So these figures don't include the recent round of funding from Mr. Candy or anything from Elon Musk, in fact, or the membership. But nevertheless, you're making the point that the Tories are still getting more Wonga through the door.
Yes, so membership dues aren't in this, but the party tells us they pulled in 70,000 members in the fourth quarter. That's 1.8 million in donations from individual people. So it's setting aside away from the issue of official donations. So I think this is all the scrutiny which any major party gets. And the third thing, things go wrong in the campaign trail. Richard Tice was in Scotland today to unveil two defecting councillors to his party, John Gray and Ross Lambie. Sadly, he couldn't remember their surnames.
I've got John and Ross, and they're from. Are you going to challenge me on a review? We're going to ask a policy question. I'm answering policy questions.
What are the surnames?
I'm asking policy questions about how we make people better off.
My question.
Good.
My choice of question.
And John and Ross.
To you is what
and
are full
John
names?
And Ross.
What councillors are they from?
John and Ross.
What councillors are they from?
Next question.
You cannot tell me who your council defectors are today. Why not? Do you know anything about Scottish politics? You can't even name your own members.
We all have bad days. I mean, you've been on the stump before as a candidate. It's not easy, but you've got to remember you're announcing two defectors. Who are their full names? Come on, what are they? I mean, that's why he should have answered that question properly.
Yeah, so reporters out of trip, and particularly we've seen Reform...
Not tripping up, just asking the names.
Brexit Party, Reform UK, UKIP have historically had a bit of a frosty welcome north of the border, but nevertheless, when you put on the spot like that, if you have a bit of a brain fog, whatever it was, not a good look. Let's move on now to other matters. Farming is big on the radar today, and you've done another excellent edition of Chopper's podcast, speaking to somebody who some are saying is the spiritual leader, perhaps, of a Labour Party rural revolt. 40 MPs rumoured to be very unhappy about the Labour Party's inheritance tax grab. You sat down today with Henry Tufnell, who some are saying is the leader of this new Rebel Alliance.
Yes, I'm not sure he'd accept that, by the way. He wouldn't accept he was the leader. But so far there are three Labour MPs who have come out against these changes to inheritance tax. We had farmers on earlier, and a lot on GBNews, worrying about the future family farms. Will they need to be broken up in order to pay tax? The limit is £1 million for an unmarried farmer, £2 million for a married farmer, and anything above that you pay 20%. That's why farmers are worrying about breaking up these farms. Now, I spoke to Henry Tufnell. He's the Labour MP for Mid and South Pembrokeshire for Chopper's Political Podcast. He talks about a need to reset the relationship with the countryside that's gone wrong. And it's very brave, by the way, for an MP just starting out, I think, to oppose the government. But clearly it matters. He's got 1,000 farms in his constituency. Here's what he had to say to us.
The girl, the whip's happy with you as a new MP, being prickly on this policy?
Well, yeah, there's always the rough and tumble of politics. But fundamentally, Keir Starmer talked about country first, party second, and I've got a lot of farmers in my seat. I've engaged them extensively over a long period of time, and I was elected by them to come to Westminster to stand up for them, and I'm standing by them now.
Now, we understand that there has been a meeting of concerned Labour MPs. This is a Labour issue, by the way, because Labour did so well in the election. They've got lots of rural seats now, formerly Tory seats. So Labour MPs meeting with the Treasury. We don't know what happened at that meeting. In number 10, they're saying we don't know about it. But I think it's bubbling. 40 MPs, even if there's that many, won't be enough to reject it. You need at least 3 times that figure to get anywhere near being a problem for the Labour government.
But these 40 MPs, of course, are walking the perilous tightrope of reality. They're in government, and yet their own constituents, rural seats, are furious about Labour Party policy, particularly when, before the general election, this is what they keep saying, Sir Keir Starmer at the National Farmers Union conference said that they would not do this, and then they went ahead and did it.
I think that was Steve Reid when he was Shadow Environment Secretary.
But no, Starmer did as well.
Yeah, Starmer too, yeah.
But the point is, now they're in power, they did a U-turn on this. The farmers are utterly furious.
They feel sold out, Martin.
They do. In fact, let's talk to one of them now. Chris, stick around, but let's talk to a beef and sheep farmer, James Wright. James, welcome to the show. We have got James Wright. James Wright joins us now. James, welcome to the show. There you are, down on the farm. So the farmers are revolting. Now it appears 40 Labour MPs are revolting. Are you convinced that this will amount to anything more than a row of beans?
Well, look, I've been called nicer things when you come on the TV, but this is a fight we didn't need to have. Labour came in with a mandate for change. They offered farmers a new deal, and in the first hurdle they gave us the family farm tax. We didn't need to be having this argument. You know, food security is national security. I want to be thinking about looking after my cows, lambing and calving, but instead I'm here having to talk to you because Labour can't get their act together in rural communities.
Do you think that the chickens might come home to roost now, though? I had Ollie Harrison in the studio earlier on, and he was saying we're looking at food shortages being perhaps something inevitable now. Maybe that's what it's going to take. We saw this back in the year 2000. Tony Blair enjoying popularity that Sir Keir Starmer, or indeed any modern political leader, could even dream of. The farmers then joined up with the road haulage lads, with the fuel depot people, and there were food shortages on the shelves, and we saw a 25 percentile drop in popularity for Tony Blair. He took action. If the politics doesn't work, do you think a lack of bread on the shelves might?
Well, look, it isn't also just about the family farm tax. We've also got the land use framework, which is Labour's consultation on how land will be used. And they want to take 18% away from primary food production. 9% will be rewilded and another 9% will be degraded for nature. You know, this is existential for the countryside and the nation's food security. You know, the beef price has already soared. It's the highest it's ever been, £6.30 a kilo at the farm gate. The 5-year average pre-2020 was £3.20. It's gone up enormously. And this is because there are fewer farmers producing our food. You know, we really are on the cusp at a time when we're seeing a more unstable world. We should be investing in farming, not creating a tax, which, to be honest, doesn't even raise that much money.
OK, I'm James Wright. I'm joined by Chris Hope, our political editor in the studio. He's got a question for you.
But, James, the government says they've got to raise money somehow to cover all of our public services, and they're concerned particularly about, as they see it, landowners saying their farmers to avoid inheritance tax. What would you do to plug that gap, to deal with those who are avoiders and protect family farms?
Well, there's a deal that's been on the table for a while, which is that you basically treat it like capital gains tax. So if somebody buys a farm and then they pass it on to their children when they die, as long as they don't sell that farm, they don't pay inheritance tax. If you sell that farm, then you pay it. That will protect the family farms who pass it down generation to generation, but will stop those speculators that have driven up the land values. The NFU presented this to the Treasury a few weeks ago, and they weren't even interested in entertaining it, because this isn't about raising money, Chris. This is about an ideology, because Labour do not understand the countryside. They don't understand what they're doing.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the beef and sheep farmer James Wright. Certainly got a major beef with Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you very much for joining us on today's show. Now, a government spokesperson has said this: our commitment to farmers remains steadfast. We will invest £5 billion into farming over the next 2 years, the largest budget for sustainable food production in our country's history. Now, Chris, while I've got you here, very quickly, you also went into lobby. You got news about the coalition of the willing. Seems more countries are joining Starmer's makeshift army.
Yeah, this is good news. So, obviously, we're all concerned about Ukraine. This coalition of the willing announced by Sir Keir Starmer last Sunday at the Lancaster House Peace Summit. We now know that around 20 countries sent officials to meetings yesterday about putting troops in or being part of this coalition in some form.
Do we know which countries
yet?
No,
we don't know yet, but there's a conference call tomorrow. Our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is on that call with European leaders. It's moving rapidly, so hopefully the idea is that if the continent of Europe, with UK and France leading, can create a coalition of the willing with as many as 20 countries to look after the peace in Ukraine with a firm US backstop, we might get past this crisis right now. But of course, we haven't even talked about negotiating with Putin yet. This is all about, frankly, Europe negotiating with Trump for his support. Putin is for another day.
And don't forget, the Kremlin said today any such troops in Ukraine will be seen as a violation of terms, and they will see this as an act of provocation.
So how they're badged, they can't be NATO troops, they can't be EU troops, because that would be against where we would sit in the UK. What are they called? A European peacekeeping force? Who knows?
OK, thank you very much, Chris. So excellent as ever, our political editor, the best in the business. Now, it's the final week now to see how you could win one of 2 amazing prize bundles and our latest Great British Giveaway.
Lines close tomorrow on your chance to be one of 2 big winners. As we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, as lines close at 6 p.m. tomorrow. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming next, our new sentencing guidelines: blatant bias against Christians and straight white men while favouring ethnic minority and trans people. More on that next with the superfluous Stephen Barrett. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And the BAFTA-winning actress, Daisy May Cooper, isn't holding back about what she thinks about Shakespeare. She thinks it's time to ditch the lot.
Well, comparing his plays to studying EastEnders in 600 years' time, she says that kids would be better off learning from TV dramas. But is she onto something, or is the Bard still a class act?
Sometimes it's better not to say anything, isn't it? Anyway, joining us to discuss this is the lifestyle journalist and parenting expert Annette Kello. Annette, is studying Shakespeare these days the same as if you forced children in 600 years' time to study Pat Butcher?
Exactly. I mean, Pat Butcher's earrings to start with, maybe studying those in 600 years. But I think while she has a point that it is very old, I think we need to bring it up to speed and not scrap it, but reimagine it so that people today can learn it. The plays are quite long, which might be quite hard for kids to decipher. But I do think there's something in keeping it. We know that there's loads of words. I think it's 1,700 words that Shakespeare invented. And come on, which ones do you know? Swagger?
Oh, we were talking...
Addiction?
This is cheating, because we were talking a bit about this in the break.
Bandit.
But assassination, critic, majestic...
Swagger.
and phrases, like, it's all Greek to me. I mean, these things that just roll off the tongue. I mean, it's so important, actually, for understanding our own language more than anything else.
Exactly, and actually Jay-Z quoted that he takes inspiration from Shakespeare because apparently there's something to do with the rhythm that is similar to rapping. So I think things like that can be a really good lesson for children to kind of get in the zone with it, because it's quite hard to learn otherwise.
I mean, I can imagine it's very hard to teach Shakespeare these days to young children, because they are the TikTok generation.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 5:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the Tories will attempt to overturn new two-tier justice rules for judges that give special treatment to criminals from ethnic, religious and gender minority backgrounds. Now, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has promised to write to the Council to recommend reversing this guidance. But is there time to do this? Has she been asleep at the wheel? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the barrister and writer, the magnificent Stephen Barrett. Stephen, always a pleasure to have your company. This has really got people going today for understandable reasons. Lady Justice is meant to be blind. Lady Justice is not meant to give preferential treatment to you if you're gay or trans or black or from a religious background. And yet these sentencing guidelines seem to suggest those people might dodge justice. Tell us more.
Well, yes, Martin, I think this is evidence that your viewers and listeners can understand of how this sort of woke ideology, how identity politics is now riven throughout our professional class. And what happened, it's a two-stage process. So what happened was in 2003, Blair creates this committee. Now, I want to get a little bit philosophical, so forgive me, but Plato, the old Greek, the man with the beard, he had an idea in his book called The Republic, that the ideal society would be run by a small group of philosopher princes, i.e. experts. That idea is effectively picked up by Tony Blair, dusted off, and applied to society. He creates things like the Sentencing Council. All that is Plato's idea of a group of experts. They know everything, Martin, for they are judges, and they are lawyers learned in the law. Oh, they are so wise, Martin, that they will make good laws. And then fast forward 25 years or however many it's been, and we get to this absolute rubbish because they've basically been brainwashed into cultish thinking that identity politics is what we all want. And the public don't want this. This is totally disconnected from what anybody in the public of any religious minority or cultural background, all the sane people have got all the characteristics under the sun. I mean, Martin, you know, I don't want special treatment for bisexuals. You know, this is just nonsense. This is tosh. But what has happened is that this idea of elite governance is nonsense. The idea that our actual government, the people we elect, because the first thing Shabana Mahmood did, Martin, was try to pretend to be powerless. She tried to be performatively powerless. Oh, dear, poor me. I'm just the Lord Chancellor. I'm not able to do anything. Well, sorry, love. That's really just not convincing. We need them to step up and actually govern the country. And what's going on here, again, I mean, I don't particularly like the idea of using judicial review to fix this. We should use the muscular powers of the state. We should use Parliament to fix this. We should probably get rid of the Sentencing Council because they're just a bunch of elite and out-of-touch people who haven't got a clue what they're doing. They have what I call a mock democracy. So do you remember mock turtle soup, which wasn't actually turtle soup? And it's mock democracy. So they carry out things called consultations that none of us ever know are happening. None of us ever see. Hardly any of us ever respond to. And then they'll act. And then they say, well, we carried out a consultation. And it's like, well, that's just mock democracy. Let's go back to actual democracy, make the minister accountable, and then we can use the press and the media. You are part of our constitution to fix things when they've obviously gone wrong. This has obviously gone wrong.
OK, Stephen Barrett, here's the big question. So at present, this is suggesting that a pre-sentence reports, which of course would impact one's ethnic background, their cultural differences, their faith minority, their sexuality, even if they're women, especially if they're pregnant. Now, Shabana Mahmood has suddenly reared up on her haunches and said, no, I want a meeting about this. I'm going to write a stiff letter. I want amendments. Might have done that a bit earlier. I digress. It's now the 6th of March. This comes into law on the 1st of April. Is there time to apply the handbrake to this? Or, Stephen Barrett, could we see white working class lads getting stiffer sentences than other people in Britain?
Well, if this comes into force, that is what will happen. So don't let anybody tell you anything else on that. Of course, we can fix it before then, and we can use the power of the state. The country can actually move an awful lot quicker. But I want your listeners and viewers to see that this tells you an awful lot about governance, because she's basically not doing any work. All of this happened under her watch. It was totally under her nose. The senior civil servant went to the meeting. She didn't go to the meeting. She almost certainly didn't actually read anything about it. And it was all done without anybody paying attention. One of the great strengths of our constitution, if we can get it back, Martin, if we can restore it, is that ministers actually have to pay attention to things. Otherwise, they get hauled in front of the media and publicly embarrassed. So I'm afraid for Shabana Mahmood, for the good of our constitution and our country, she has to be hauled in front of the media and publicly embarrassed. She has more than enough time to fix this, and she should. She must. It's absolutely disgraceful. These, by the way, Martin, they are political choices, so they are for the people. I've never liked the idea of taking them away and thinking that the elite get to decide. I mean, should women be treated less harshly if they commit crimes? I don't know. That's a political question, and I don't think it's for me as a lawyer to tell your viewers and listeners what they think. They'll have a view. But what we need to go back to is the idea that the view of the majority is what is done. That's democracy. Anything else is just Plato's little fantasy of philosopher princes, which doesn't work.
Stephen Barrett, magnificent. I should say for balance that Shabana Mahmood did say herself today, as someone who is from an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind. There will never be a tier sentencing approach under my watch, except there could be. Stephen Barrett, thank you very, very much for joining us. As ever, always an absolute pleasure. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including could Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize? That's a debate we'll be having shortly. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. Your top stories this hour. As you've been hearing, triple killer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. The 26-year-old was found guilty by a jury at Cambridge Crown Court after around 45 minutes. Clifford had previously denied rape. He previously admitted murdering Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt at their home in Bushey in July last year. Clifford was tried in his absence after refusing to leave his cell at HMP Belmarsh. GB News understands this afternoon that 20 countries are in talks about joining a coalition of the willing to keep the peace in Ukraine. It was announced earlier today that the UK government has signed a £30 million deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea. Sir Keir Starmer said that the UK will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. Posting on X after that EU leaders summit in Brussels, President Zelensky said that, quote, everyone must ensure that Russia, the sole source of this war, accepts the need to end it. He went on to add that the next step is basic trust in the circumstances in which the negotiations are taking place. The Prime Minister spoke to GB News' Catherine Forster a short time ago.
We've enjoyed 80 years of peace, and we've enjoyed 80 years of peace because we've had such a close relationship with the United States. We are closer than any other country to the United States when it comes to our defence, our security, our intelligence sharing. And we've worked with our European partners within NATO, which is the most important alliance the world has ever seen. And we've never made that choice between siding, as it were, with the US or with Europe. Historically, we've never done that. Churchill didn't do it, Attlee didn't do it, and it's certainly not the right thing to do now when things are extremely volatile.
An update from the White House. They say that there is no decision at this time on the legal status for Ukrainians in the US. That comes as President Trump's administration confirmed that they suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine as France stepped in to offer intelligence. The White House said yesterday that it is reconsidering its pause in funding for Ukraine, and talks between the United States and President Zelensky's country over a minerals deal are ongoing. Defence Secretary John Healey is meeting his counterpart, Pete Hegseth, today in Washington. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2887 and €1.1923. The price of gold is £2,264.12 per ounce, and the FTSE 100s closed the day at 8,682 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. A couple of problems in South Yorkshire. First of all, on the A1M, the northbound carriageway of the motorway partly blocked near Doncaster, where a lorry's broken down. It's queuing back towards the M18. And the M1 is down to a single lane northbound from junction 34 to 35 near Rotherham. Everyone's been squeezed into the outside lane on that three-lane stretch for emergency repairs after a lorry caught fire. Problems in the west of England, in Shropshire, just east of Telford, the A41. The Newport Road is closed off the Pickmere roundabout. That's due to an accident. And in Herefordshire, the A49 is closed southbound just north of Hereford at Wellington following an accident and spillage. And in Cornwall, north of St Austell, the St Austell Road, that's closed following a multi-vehicle collision. And all Skybus flights to and from the Isles of Scilly are cancelled due to the bad weather. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now let's cross live now to the moon, where a private US company will attempt to land a spacecraft close to the moon's south pole any moment now. And that's carrying scientific instruments, including a hopping robot and the first lunar mobile communications antennae. Now, Intuitive Machines is working with US Space Agency NASA to look for evidence of water and ice on the lunar surface. That's the control room you can see on your screens live now. It looks like they're in a casino in Las Vegas. And lunar landings are very, very difficult, of course, and the company will be hoping for a smooth touchdown after its first craft landed on its side last year. As soon as that lands, of course, we'll bring you live shots there direct from the moon. Now, moving on, could Donald Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize? Now, it might seem insurmountable. Supporters, however, argue his diplomacy in the Middle East makes him a worthy candidate, but critics say his foreign policy has been divisive and controversial, to say the least. So, does Trump deserve the honour, or would it damage the prize's reputation? Let's debate this now. I'm joined by Errol Moorcoach from Republicans Abroad UK and the US political commentator and podcaster Eric McElroy. Let's start with you, Errol. Today, Donald Trump is saying you're dead to Hamas. It might seem an unlikely moment to say, should he take peace as top gong? But if he's sitting down with Hamas and bringing an end to that, if he's sitting down with Vladimir Putin and ending a war that the Liberals couldn't stop in 3 years, do you think perhaps the impossible could happen? Could Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize?
You know, I think this time around he possibly could get what he's deserved for a long time. The concept of killing hostage takers, I would say, is a pro-peace move. The less hostage takers that exist, the more peace that will exist on Earth. But you have to look at it from like a cross-map perspective. Look at the Abraham Accords. That's one. Look at detente with North Korea. That's two. Look at the situation in Ukraine and Russia. That's three. That's examples of a man who is committed to peace. Whether or not he was able to achieve denuclearization in North Korea, which nobody has done, he at least stopped the missiles from flying, and he sought common ground. And that's the things that the Nobel Prize Committee should be looking at. I think in the U.S. you have Wilson, you have Roosevelt, you have Carter and Obama. One of them is the drone strike king. So I'm not sure why on earth he has the Nobel Prize. Donald Trump is probably the biggest change maker in geopolitics in the 21st century. And that change has been from a neocon, pro-war, America imperialistic policy, which started the century, led by George Bush and other people and continued by Barack Obama, to a much more bilateral, peace-driven initiative, somebody who's looking for economic engagement, not military engagement. If you look at the mineral rights deal, for example, as opposed to sending in 50,000 troops, let's send in 50,000 oil and gas workers. So if you look at it objectively, yes, he should be considered and he should win it, but, you know, it's in Norway, so you never know.
Okay, Eric McElroy, could there be a planet on which Donald Trump lifts the Nobel Peace Prize in your eyes?
There could. I'm not quite sure if it's the planet Earth. But I would say that it's interesting to see someone who's proposed ethnic cleansing in Gaza to be nominated for a Peace Prize. Someone who's suggested trying to take over Greenland when it already has a home, to take over Panama for no understandable reason. I think one of the reasons why he is capitulating to Putin so much is because it gives him a reason. If he gives away Ukraine, it gives him the empirical justification to go after territory that he wants to seize, including moves that he's making towards Canada. So this does not sound like a man of peace to me. And threatening to kill people on a social media platform doesn't sound much like it either.
But Eric, is it not fair to say, in fact, no, Errol, I'll come to you, is it not fair to say, I had the great Peter Hitchens on the show earlier on, and he pointed out that it seems to be a conservative, a right-wing position now to try and end wars, and a left-wing, a liberal, a socialist position to try and keep them going, to fund them, we're hearing about more troops, more bombs, more resources going into Ukraine at a time where peace could be on the table.
Absolutely, and we find it disgusting. I think Republican voters learned their lesson, especially from being lied to by warmongers like Dick Cheney, who was a big supporter of Kamala Harris in this campaign, or like George Bush, who, he lied, weapons of mass destruction. This was all nonsense. My friends went over and fought in wars that were built on nothing. So the idea that our parties have changed, I think our party learned our lesson, and the Democrat voters realized that their only gasp to try to win this election was to be more bellicose and more war hawkish than the Republicans. So it's American parties always switch back and forth, but I'm personally disgusted. I went to UC Berkeley. There was no anti-war protests at Berkeley. Not a single person was anti-war. It was pro-war, gum up the Russian war machine with bodies, even though those bodies are somebody's kid. So I think the psychology changed completely. We're the party of peace. We're the party of detente. They're the party of BlackRock and Raytheon. Keep in mind, the Defense Secretary of the United States under Obama was a Raytheon executive. So you're
Eric.
not looking at that revolving door, and that's what the Democrats are.
Errol, let's let Eric get a word in. Eric, final word to you. It used to be give peace a chance was the position of the left. It now seems to be give war a chance.
I think it's about giving peace a chance, not abandonment a chance, abandonment of our allies. Ukraine is asking for security guarantees. That's what they need for peace, because they know that Putin is a liar, Putin is a murderer, and Putin has kidnapped children from Ukraine. So why abandon our ally by cutting off military aid, cutting off intelligence support, and possibly even deporting 250,000 Ukrainians back into a war zone? Standing with Putin is not the way to bring about peace. Standing with our allies is the way to do it.
Gentlemen, a spirited debate and stranger things have happened. Perhaps Donald Trump could lift the Nobel Peace Prize. Errol Moorcoach and Eric McElroy, thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Now, let's just take you back to the moon. Let's remind you, a commercial lander is now approaching the moon, and we'll keep you updated when that epic, historic touchdown is achieved. That's the Command HQ there, a private company teaming up with NASA, attempting to land a spacecraft close on the moon. And remember, last time it fell onto its side. Now, moving on, if you're in search of some winter sun, don't go to the moon. Here is the forecast for some of our top European holiday destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
It's an unsettled story across some parts of Western Europe as we go through the next couple of days. There's the risk of some heavy, thundery rain bringing some flooding. There's a system pushing into Portugal, western Spain, and that's bringing some intense rain. Also, some heavy rain already affecting eastern parts of Spain, so further totals building up, causing more issues. More unsettled weather across parts of the Mediterranean, though further east towards Greece it's looking largely dry. Then quite a mixed bag when we head through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, it is going to be turning cloudier with some showers and also some longer spells of rain. But with more cloud in the skies, that means things aren't going to be turning quite as chilly as they have done recently. And it's all as a result of low pressure dragging in some frontal systems, so bringing in more cloud and also some outbreaks of rain overnight. Firstly into the west, and then it slowly pushes its way eastwards. But plenty of dry and clear spells across parts of central and southeastern England. So turning a little bit chillier here, could possibly see once again another patchy frost by the morning. And then towards dawn, once again across Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, we could see some patchy frost here as skies begin to clear. But across northern parts of England, northern parts of Wales in particular, plenty of low cloud and some damp weather to start on Friday. Across Scotland, though, a slightly drier picture. As I mentioned, some clearer skies, which means some patchy frost at times. I can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north of Scotland too. Once again, a brighter start across Northern Ireland, but for much of northern England, parts of Wales, still plenty of low cloud, likely going to be quite a murky start with some outbreaks of rain, similar across parts of Cornwall too. But for East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent, a brighter but chillier start. And then through the course of the day, that's where we'll see the best of the brightness, so more sunny skies on offer. But for many, it's going to be a much cloudier day, quite damp at times too, but brightening up later across parts of Scotland as well. So Scotland, the southeast, that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine, but for many, it's going to be a much cloudier and murky day on offer, particularly across parts of the west. But temperatures still widely above average, so highs around 15, possibly 16 Celsius, where we see the sunshine stick around. Through into the evening, not much change, still plenty of cloud across the country, outbreaks of rain at times, mostly light rain and drizzle, and still some clearer skies across parts of the southeast. More sunshine to come as we head into next week, but temperatures dipping away, so seeing some colder nights and days on offer. Bye-bye.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation